All right. Good morning. Good morning. It is your boy Genesis. It is currently 4:22 a.m. It is 4:23 a.m. right now. All right. It is currently the 23rd of June 2025. Welcome to the live show. You know what time it is. All right. With that being said, we were live about, I'll say, 9 hours ago. And we actually saw this briefing by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, but some people obviously missed it. So we're going to run this back and, of course, check out some more recent activities going on in the United States. And, of course, concerning Israel, Iran, the commander in chief, President Donald J. Trump, what he is currently doing. And of course, nobody knows his next move because this is the leader of the free world. So, in hindsight, nobody should actually know what he's going to do next, which I admire him for that. He's not out here telling the world, announcing to the world what he's going to do next, but he uses deception and tricks to perform his duties, which that's what you have to do. This is called being a leader. And also, when you're ruling at this level, when you are a leader at this level, you have to do what you have to do, get the job done. You have to do what you have to do to get the job done. So, with that being said, we're going to check this out. Everybody in the chat, God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. Yes, welcome back to this live show. Welcome back to the live show. All right, with that being said, you can voice your opinion in the chat, but be respectful. Please be respectful. It is free speech, ladies and gentlemen. Free speech, whether you're liberal or conservative, doesn't matter. This is a free speech platform. All right. Doesn't matter, like I mentioned. Even if you are a Democrat or a Republican, doesn't matter. Nobody cares on this platform, okay? Shout out to Jet. Shout out to Mr. Booski. Shout out to everybody tuning in right now. All right, here we go.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning. Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy across the board, this was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Isfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordo and Natanz, the U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Isfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the President clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the President and the Secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
Me?
Yeah.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The President authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the President decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process, wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf, in those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sir, to your first question, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
So they were given no advance warning?
No, sir.
And congressional?
They were notified after the planes were safely out. Well, we complied with the notification requirements of the War Powers Act.
After the attacks, they were notified?
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. Two quick questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian
nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally as Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence in the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordo, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be, as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes?
Thank you very much. General Caine, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets and force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region, and we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes?
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, anything can happen in conflict. We acknowledge that. But the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military, nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace. But I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Kaine has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
One thing is for sure, America is the greatest country on the face of the earth. And everybody's complaining. Some people are, well, not everybody's complaining. Some people are complaining. For example, Candace Owens, and her types are complaining. But the fact is, we do not have the type of information that the commander-in-chief has. To say that we know more than the president of the United States or that we have more information concerning Iran and their nuclear capabilities is just absurd. There's no way we know more than the commander-in-chief. There's no way we as civilians or citizens know more than the commander-in-chief, than the leader of the free world. It's just not, come on, man. There's something called redacted files. There's something called classified information that we do not have privilege to see or hear or even know about. So just have some faith in the commander-in-chief and just go
All
with
right,
the flow.
you've been watching the press conference at the Pentagon there. We have now learned the operation named Midnight Hammer. Yeah. Remarkable details in the operation as the world watched B-2 stealth bombers fly west towards Hawaii and Guam. 7 B-2 bombers, 2 crew members each, refueling, flying east, delivering their targets, hitting their targets, 14 total bombs under total stealth. Not a single shot fired, says Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Dan Kaine, saying that no missiles were launched, no shots fired at our mission, no Iranian planes got airborne. They simply didn't see it. I want to bring back the special report anchor and our executive editor, Brett Baer. Brett, it's remarkable, these details, to learn that we literally got in and out without really being detected, hit all targets. It just strikes you at really the dominance. We heard from Secretary Hegseth, the unmatched capability of the American military. But boy, you really got to see it here and likely sending a message to those that would do us harm.
Definitely. This is exactly what we were hoping for. Some details, as you mentioned, 7 B-2 bombers. This is the largest B-2 mission ever in the history of the U.S., dropping 14 of these massive ordnance penetrator bombs. Remember, those are 30,000 pounds each, the GBU-57. That's 420,000 pounds of ordnance just in the B-2 bombers dropping on those 3 nuclear sites. Then you add some 30-plus Tomahawk missiles from U.S. submarines. You've got 75 precision-guided bombs falling on these nuclear sites. Essentially, the message was, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program, and there is time for Iran to get back to the table, and the president seeks peace. But as we talked about before we came to this press conference, and Rachel, you mentioned the deception and the effort to really tighten down on operational security. You heard a little bit about that. Not only decoy planes going different places, also ghost planes on radars, as well as the B-2s going to the west, while others flew from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They are not saying exactly what the battle damage assessment is. Rightfully so. They're waiting for some more details on the ground. But that's really the big question. Where does Iran's nuclear program stand tonight or today? And this sounds like it is pretty devastated and decimated.
Brett, do you have any sense as to how they, quote unquote, complete a BDA, a battle damage assessment? Because, at this point, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's unlikely that the Iranians are going to welcome in inspectors to look at what's left.
Yeah, the Israelis are on the ground. They're on the ground in significant numbers. We don't know exactly how, where, when, but they will provide some battle damage assessment from the ground, and then obviously our satellites and what we have in the air can give us decent pictures. I think the question about the nuclear material is what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was asked, and said he's going to need more time. I was struck by, this isn't about regime change. This is very precision. We talked about that going in. That was the message from the president last night, and it is one in which the Iranian leadership has to make a decision now. But if there is an attack on a U.S. facility, U.S. people, U.S. soldiers, U.S. bases, all bets are off.
Brad, they were asked, Secretary Hegseth was asked if the administration is in direct contact with Iran. Of course, he said yes, public and private measures. But something he said they know exactly what steps they need to take for peace. He didn't say what those steps are. What do you think those steps are?
Well, to give up enrichment has been one of the bars to start. And I think there's a long list that they've been talking about with the Europeans that has circulated around that the Iranians turned their back on in Geneva. They may turn their back the other way, go back to the table, considering what they just saw last night. But we'll see. The question really is the Iranian leadership and when we hear from them. So far, it's been a lot of bluster online, a lot of social media saying, the response is yet to come. It is going to be devastating for Israel and the U.S. Clearly, we'll see. And we mentioned the tentacles of terrorist cells that we really have to be careful of.
Yeah, Brett, I was really also struck by Pete Hegseth, in particular, Secretary Hegseth, talking about the desire for peace, the desire to make sure that this does not go beyond these strikes, that Donald Trump, the president, wants them at the negotiating table to end this. That was very encouraging to somebody like me who's very concerned about this expanding into regime change. That felt good. On the other hand, there's a lot of tripwires here. We've got the bases that are there that are somewhat vulnerable, despite the threats from the U.S. government saying, don't touch our men. We also have the Houthis who have now torn up their ceasefire agreement. So there could be something that happens to our ships in the Red Sea. And then, of course, what I'm most concerned about is the fact that we've had 4 years of Joe Biden's open border and these sleeper cells. So talk to me about how President Trump, Homeland Security, Pete Hegseth, everybody involved is working to mitigate those very real threats on the homeland included, to make sure this doesn't expand into a greater war. Because as you know, Brett, there's a lot of political implications here. By the way, not hearing much about the big, beautiful bill that was the #1 issue until Israel striked, but also the fact that, this is not a left-right issue. There are a lot of people in the MAGA base who voted for Donald Trump because they wanted peace and really hope that this leads to peace. So I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but talk to me about the politics around this, considering all of those things.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the threat of the terrorist reach of the Iranian regime, which has been doing it for decades through proxies, doing some very bad things. The president came to the conclusion that those tentacles, those terrorist reach elements, with a nuclear weapon or some nuclear even a dirty bomb, is exponentially more of a threat to the U.S. and to our allies, and decided it was time to act. If you're worried about, the retaliation, imagine the retaliation with Iran with a nuclear bomb. Let's just put that aside. Yeah. There is a higher state of alert. The FBI, the Homeland Security, individual cities have been on higher states of alert since this all happened over the past week or so, but now they'll be even more so. And the amount of strength, military strength we have in the region suggests they're going to do a lot to try to protect those bases directly beyond what is normally done. As for the politics of this, you're right. There is no left and right. There are Republicans who say it's not constitutional, who say that there should be, Congress should weigh in. However, you have Democrats who say this is the right move and it protects the homeland. I think there's going to be a lot of vocal voices. The question is next steps. And right now, the president's signaling that this is a very limited operation unless Iran acts to get us in. Israel's not going to convince the U.S. to do anything more than we're saying we're going to do. And I think that boots on the ground are completely off the table.
You know, Brett, we were just showing our viewers the photos that the White House put out from the Situation Room. And had I been in that Pentagon press briefing, I think my question would have been to Chairman Kaine, what was behind? What's the story behind his looked like Texas hook'em horns in a downward position? He seemed to be like literally physically showing us some sort of operational explaining it. And, you know, I think we pull that one up here and you'll see it in just a second. But what's interesting, Brett, is, you know, when you were talking about the proxies, Hezbollah hasn't fired a single shot. Hamas is on its back. The Houthis, very, very neutralized. You wonder if they're taking in some of this and listening, perhaps particularly, there's the shot, that one right there. He's talking about an operation which has once again shown American dominance globally at a time when there wasn't the deterrence of the last administration. Now, obviously, American deterrence appears to be back. You've got to think the proxies are paying very close attention to this.
Raising Kaine,
yeah, definitely. It looks to me like there's 2 bunker buster bombs coming out of 2 B-2s heading towards Fordo, but I'm just guessing there. Yeah. And by the way, as far as asking those questions in the briefing, it does bring me back to those days of being in that front row. And there are still some guys there that are there from the time that I was there. They're a little bit grayer, but they are very knowledgeable about the U.S. military as they ask those questions. I think, yeah, you have to watch not only the Iranian leadership, but what you hear from Hezbollah, which, by the way, so far has been very quiet since the pager walkie-talkie attack by Israel. Their leadership hasn't piped up at all. Hamas, there are really not a lot of leaders. They're in hiding. And the Houthis in Yemen have really taken it on the chin. Their leadership just taken out, the Israelis took out a meeting just last week of the Houthi leadership. So we'll see. They're not impotent. They have a response, Iran does. And that's what the U.S. has to watch very closely.
Brett, to build on Griff's question here.
Look, I'm not saying that Iran is bluffing, but remember when the Supreme Leader said, we're going to attack the United States and it's going to be hard. This was what, 6 days ago? They said they were going to do it on that same day. Man, please. Man, please. Talking about you're going to attack the United States. Total obliteration. That's what is going to happen. Okay, so just relax with all the bluffing. Relax, okay? Iran needs to relax. This ain't Joe Biden. This is Trump. If one hair is touched, okay, I'll go make my coffee and enjoy the fireworks because it's going to happen really fast. Their head would spin.
Beyond the rebel groups, there was one line in there. Pete Hegseth said it exactly like this, showing the world that American deterrence is back. Griff alluded to that. I hear that, and I think beyond those rebel groups, to the question I asked you before we got into the press conference, to me, that's sending a message to Russia, that's sending a message to North Korea, and just like firing missiles at Syria during dessert, this sends a message to Xi Jinping that we mean business, we are going to use our might to deter, and you better watch out and not do something stupid. Was that your takeaway?
100%. It reestablishes deterrence for the U.S., a president that is willing to pull the trigger despite political wins in his own party that perhaps are pushing him not to. He is willing to act on the intelligence he gets as well as his gut instinct. in his mind to protect the United States. That is his definition of America first, and that sends a message not just to Iran, but to Russia and to China as they encircle Taiwan. It sends a message that the U.S. Is willing to act with the best and biggest military in the world. Do we want to get engaged around the world? No. Can we afford to be in two wars at the same time? No. But action and reaction to things that are happening, clearly that was a signal around the world.
Brett, do we have a clear understanding of whose intel this was based on? Is it Israeli intel, American intel? I know that a lot of Americans are, they trust Donald Trump, President Trump. They absolutely trust Pete Hegseth. But the intel apparatus that was in place before is still there. And this is the intel apparatus that, told us that there was Russia collusion and there was, weapons of mass destruction. And so how can we as Americans know that we're getting the best intel and that it's not biased?
I totally agree with you asking those questions. And ahead of the Iraq War, we asked a lot of questions, and there were 17 international intelligence agencies that told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't the case. So there are real questions. At the end of that briefing, you heard that reference to Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard's testimony on Capitol Hill in March, in which she said they are moving forward with their nuclear as far as their material. However, the decision has not been made to move forward with a bomb. Between March and this action today, the president said he's convinced that he's seen intelligence that suggests that they were moving forward and getting closer to the point where he thought it was imminent. That is what the Israeli prime minister says. And now Tulsi Gabbard and others have linked up saying that it was moving forward to the point where it was a threat. You have to trust it until we see it, but that is what they are saying publicly and answering that question.
Well, just adding to Rachel's question, which is really such an important question about that, it does appear, unlike Iraq you referenced, that the intelligence this time is at least much clearer insofar as we had this May 31 report out of the IAEA, which is the UN's nuclear watchdog, for the first time breaking in 20 years, saying that Iran was in breach of nuclear non-proliferation treaty, enriching uranium up to 60%. They say this, Brett. They say, quote, the fact that Iran is the only non-nuclear weapon state in the world that is producing and accumulating uranium enriched to 60% remains a matter of serious concern. That's coming at the end of May, and it does track, obviously, we would assume, with our intelligence.
Exactly. And so what IAEA essentially was saying was they are enriching past the point of the civilian program. They are enriching uranium. They have the material, but they have not made the decision to move forward with a bomb. So the Iranians are saying we're not going to make a bomb, yet we're stockpiling this weapons-grade material, and tomorrow they could turn and say we want to make a bomb. That was the imminent threat. And the IAEA was public on that. I think there was more intelligence that suggested other things were happening as far as moving components around Iran.
The fact is, Americans agree on one truth, which is Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Okay, so what is the solution to Iran not having a nuclear weapon? Somebody's just tell me in the chat, what is the solution to Iran not having a nuclear weapon? So, pull up your big boy pants and allow the 45th, now the 47th president, Donald J. Trump, let him do what has to be done. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to do it. And he's doing it. Look, if 77.3 million voted for this man, he's only been president for what? February, March, April, May, June, for 5 months. And you already are not in support of him and you voted for him. Can you just have a little faith? Can you have a little faith and understand that he has information that you do not have? You don't have classified information. We don't have classified information. We're not the commander-in-chief. he has the highest seat, the highest office in the land. Now, that doesn't mean he's king. He's not. Still has to answer to the people, of course, because the people put him there. However, his job is to protect. His job is to protect the United States. So, to protect the United States, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I mean, godly, Jesus. Can you guys just understand that fact?
For years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. But if peace does
Look, enjoy the show.
not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
Joining me now in his first interview since the U.S. action is the Secretary of State of America, Secretary Marco Rubio. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Are we now at war with Iran?
No, we're not. This is not a war against Iran. This is very simple. 67 days ago, the President of the United States sent the Iranians a letter, and it said, you're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're not going to have a militarized nuclear program. Let's negotiate. I want to do this diplomatically. I want to do this peacefully. They tried to play him along the way they've played every American president for the last 35 years. And, the president told them, if we don't get a deal, which is what he wanted, then I'll have to handle it differently. And that's what he did last night. He handled it differently. But that was an Iranian choice. We didn't make that choice. They did. By playing games with Donald Trump, they made a huge mistake. And President Trump acted last night. And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us. Privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done. They got to do what they got to do for, their own public relations purposes. But the only people in the world that are unhappy about what happened in Iran last night is the regime in Iran.
Have you heard from anyone in Iran, and are you expecting retaliation?
Well, if they retaliate, it'll be the worst mistake they've ever made. Look, we can fly in and out of Iran at will. We went in last night. The president sent our military forces from halfway across the world, went in, conducted this operation, left. Not a shot was fired against us. They didn't even know what had happened. By the time we left, the planes were out of their airspace before they finally started realizing they had been hit. So it would be a terrible mistake if Iran retaliates. But that's not our goal. We are not declaring war on Iran. We're not looking for war on Iran. But if they attack us, then I think we have capabilities they haven't even seen yet. It would be a terrible mistake on their part. And frankly, it's not what we hope for or wish. What we want now is to ensure that Iran never has nuclear weapons. If what they want is a civil nuclear program where they have power plants like a lot of other countries in the world have, they can do that. That's the deal that's been offered to them. They rejected it. They played us. They tried to play us, I should say. They wouldn't respond to our offers. They disappeared for 10 days. And now, the president had to take action as a response.
And the response included strategic ambiguity. Can you walk us through the plan in terms of how it was deceptive, not allowing the Iranians to understand what was really taking place?
Well, ultimately, when we do these things, it's because we care about the safety and security of our troops, of our airmen, and all those who are supporting these missions. So, obviously, the element of surprise is important in military tactics. In this particular, now, I don't think the Iranians or anyone should have been under any mystery. The president said very clearly, we have 60 days to make progress on a deal, and if we don't, I'm going to deal with it differently. But in terms of what people call deception and surprise and things of this nature, the core of that is not the success. The mission was going to be successful no matter what. The core of that was protecting our servicemen and women who are in harm's way and conducting that mission. That's the most important part. And they went in, they did what they needed to do with precision and skill that no other military in the world can do. And they left. And they were well outside of Iranian airspace before the regime even realized what had happened. And that was the goal here, and that was achieved. These planes came from halfway across the world, and no one saw them coming. And that's a huge credit to Pete Hegseth and General Caine and General Kurilla and obviously our commander-in-chief for pulling that off.
Well, the president said in a post recently that he knows where the supreme leader is hiding. But that he was not ready to take him out yet. What can you tell us about your expectations with regard to regime change in Iran?
Well, that's certainly not the goal of what we're working on here. The goal is stated very clearly in a letter the president sent the Supreme Leader about 65, 67 days ago. And in a letter he said, you're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Let's negotiate peacefully a solution. We can make a really good deal that's good for Iran, good for America, good for the world. If you don't, however, then I'm going to have to deal with this differently. The Iranians didn't like the letter. They didn't respond to it. They ultimately entered into fake negotiations and tried to play him along. In essence, they thought they could do with President Trump what they've done with presidents in the past and get away with it. And they found out last night that they can't. And the world found out last night that you can't. And that's important, not just on this issue, but for so many other issues happening around the world. I think that what we are seeing is that this is a president that tells you what he's going to do, and then he does it. And I think that to a lot of people, including the Iranian regime, is shocking.
What are your expectations in terms of Iran's nuclear capabilities today?
Well, they're certainly degraded. Look, at the end of the day, if Iran is committed to becoming a nuclear weapons power, I do think it puts the regime at risk. I really do. I think it would be the end of the regime if they tried to do that. It's certainly been set back from a technical standpoint, not just due to what we did last night, but obviously the Israelis have done incredible work in advance as well. But ultimately, they have to make a decision. It's a very simple decision. If what they want is nuclear reactors so they can have electricity, there are so many other countries in the world that do that, and they don't have to enrich their own uranium. They can do that. But if what they want is a secret program buried in the mountain where no one can see it and inspectors can only come when they say they can come, if that's what they want, then they're going to have big problems, because this is a dangerous, violent, radical regime. Not the Iranian people. We have no problem. We didn't hit Iranian people last night. We hit nuclear facilities. And if what they...
Exactly. This is very vital information for everybody, especially Americans, to know about, and even Iranians, because President Trump did not give an order to strike Iranian people. He gave an exclusive order to strike Iranian nuclear site. So when Iran says we're going to retaliate, what are you retaliating against? Are you going to bomb? What are you going to do? Attack civilians? If you do that, whatever you get, you get. So don't be out here talking about United States is the bad guy. No, because the United States is not attacking people. They're attacking the nuclear site. So everybody has to come to that conclusion, okay? Everybody understand that fact. There's a difference, okay? There is a difference. Just listen to Marco Rubio right here.
Want is some secret program that looks nothing like the civil nuclear programs around the world. It looks a lot like you're trying to build a bomb. They're going to continue to have problems, not just with us, but with many other countries in the world.
Problems like what? What do you mean?
Like the problems they're facing right now. Listen, why do we have bases in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar and UAE? All of those bases are there to help protect those countries from Iran. Why did Hezbollah exist? Because of Iran. What does Hamas exist? Because of Iran. How do the Houthis exist? Because of Iran. Who built the IEDs that maimed and killed American soldiers in Iraq? Iran. They're behind every problem in this region. They are the sole source of instability in the entire Middle East, and the world's been paying a price for this for 40-something years. Imagine those people having a nuclear weapon, just one nuclear weapon, or even the capability to being on the threshold of having a nuclear weapon. That's what the world was facing. That is unacceptable. President Trump did the world a favor last night, and now Iran should sort of wake up, the Iranian regime should wake up and say, okay, if we really want nuclear energy in our country, there's a way to do it. That offer's still there. We're prepared to talk to them tomorrow and start working on that. Steve Witkoff has traveled extensively around the world trying to reach that deal with them, but they play too many games. They play way too many games, and now they found out.
The president has said many times no nuclear weapons, but the ultimate goal also happens to be no biological weapons, chemicals, no drones, no proxy warfare. Do you believe that the Iranians will follow that and you'll achieve the ultimate goal of success here, long term?
Well, I don't know what they're going to decide to do next. If they're being rational, I think they realize, if what they want is a country.
All right. The GOAT has just tuned in. God bless you, Dr. Luke. He says, Genesis, thanks for supporting Trump with no regrets. Of course, I have no regrets. I voted for him. I believe he's making the right decisions for Americans, and he's not targeting Iranian people. He's only going for nuclear sites. So everybody come to that realization, come back to your senses, get some water in the fridge, make sure it's cold, and sit down and relax and stop having this, I don't know. Everybody's just fear-mongering everybody. No. If Iran attacks civilians, as they always do, then look, God help them.
That has a nuclear energy program, they can have that. I mean, many countries around the world, I don't like the regime, but we're not into the regime change business here. We're into the safety and security of the United States business. So that's a choice they'll have to make. I hope they're being rational in their decision making, but I think the most important thing I hope they realize is the game is up. Okay, they have played the world for 40-something years with these nuclear talks and this, delaying things. They got a crazy deal out of John Kerry when he was Secretary of State under the Obama administration, where they got billions of dollars, and by the way, agreed to something that allowed them to continue to build their missile capacity and sponsor terrorism. They've been playing the world for 40-something years. They're not going to play President Trump, and they found out last night that when he says he's going to.
That's another thing. Y'all think the commander-in-chief is Biden or somebody else. This is President Donald J. Trump. This man was born in Queens, New York. Look. Okay. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay. F around and find out.
To do something, he'll do it. And he doesn't want to do it. It's not his first choice, but it's the only choice. That's the only choice the Iranian regime left us, because they play too many games. They use diplomacy to hide behind and obfuscate and think they can buy themselves time. They think they're cute. They're not cute. And they're not going to get away with this stuff. Not under President Trump.
The Europeans have been feckless pretty much throughout this conflict in the last several weeks. What are your expectations for our partners and allies in Europe?
Well, look, I think the Europeans, particularly the Germans, the French, and the Brits, have made very clear that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. In fact, I think the French, for the first time, have kind of leaned forward even more and said they can't even have an enrichment capability. There are existing sanctions under the old JCPOA that we're no longer a part of, but they remain a part of. Iran is in complete violation. Okay, and so those three countries have to make a decision, I know later than October of this year, whether to put sanctions back on Iran, snap them back. And we encourage them to continue to press them on that front, because that's another set of pressure. So, obviously, these are allies and partners we work with closely on a bunch of issues around the world. And I think they have in their hands a very powerful piece of leverage on the Iranian regime, which is the snapback provisions under the previous JCPOA. And I think so far they've been very tough and strong on that, and we encourage them to continue to do so and to continue to tell the Iranians, the Iranian regime, I keep saying Iranian regime because it's not the people we have a quarrel with, the Iranian regime, they've consistently messaged them, and we're grateful for it, that the solution to this problem is negotiate directly with the Americans. That's another thing. They don't even talk to us directly. We always have to have a middleman. They want to pass messages and notes like we're in third grade. We're not doing that anymore. Direct negotiations. Let's talk about how we peacefully resolve this problem.
Oh, Marco Rubio, man. This man is just articulate, okay? I just love this Marco Rubio guy. Okay, look, you heard him. Nobody is in third grade, okay? Communicate. Let us know what you're talking about. No passing up notes and letters. No. Okay. It's over. Come to the table, sign the deal, let everybody move on.
The Europeans have pressured them on that point, and we encourage them to continue to do so and are grateful that they've been doing that so far.
What about our allies in the Middle East right now? Interesting to note that we have not heard from any of the proxies of Iran. No comment from the Iranians so far. No comment from Hezbollah or the Houthis. What are your reactions there, as well as our allies in the Middle East? President Trump, of course, using his first trip internationally to go and strengthen relations with our friends in the Middle East.
Well, we made clear that any of these proxies attack America, we're not only going to deal with the proxies, but we're also going to pin it on Iran. We know who's behind these. That's another thing they do. They create these little groups like the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and then they hide behind them and pretend it's not them. We know it's them, including the Houthis, by the way. So Iran will be held responsible for the actions of these groups. In terms of the other countries in the region, look, I think that we've worked very cooperatively with them. The president just had a great visit to Saudi Arabia, to the UAE, and to Qatar. Very productive. But I just ask and remind everybody, the only reason we have U.S. bases in the region, the only reason we have an air base in Qatar, an air base in UAE, an air base in Saudi Arabia, is because they are afraid that Iran will attack them. And they want us there to help defend them. And so, if Iran wasn't a threat, we wouldn't need those bases there. These countries fully recognize the threat that Iran poses. That's why they want us there to help defend their oil fields and their infrastructure, or help them defend themselves. And if the Iranian regime was no longer a threat, we wouldn't need to have any of these bases in the region. We wouldn't need to have any American service people in the region. But that's the state of affairs right now. So these countries understand what Iran is and what the regime is, and they get it. They understand it.
How long have these plans been in place to take out the nuclear facilities?
Well, the president makes the ultimate decision, and look, in terms of plans, I mean, we have all sorts of contingency plans for all sorts of possible strikes all over the world. Once the president says, okay, work up options for me, they obviously go back and, refine those. And then there are multiple points along the way in which the president has decisions to make about go or no go. And it really comes right up to 10 minutes before the bombs are actually dropped. So the president retains, as commander-in-chief, full control of these operations. But we have incredibly capable military people in our country. The operation yesterday was extraordinary, really extraordinary. Obviously, there are elements of it that will not ever be publicly shared. But suffice it to say that there is no country in the world that can do what the United States did last night through our incredible military led by our commander-in-chief. And I think a lot of credit goes out to Pete Hegseth, our defense secretary. Did a phenomenal job of managing this process. And obviously all the way down to the airmen and others who conducted this operation. It was flawless. It was perfect. It was executed with extraordinary skill, and I think demonstrates the capabilities we have, which no other country in the world has anything remotely close to this.
Secretary, what does the road ahead look like from a military standpoint in the U.S. regarding Iran over the near term?
Well, we've achieved. Yeah, we've achieved our objective. Our objective was to severely degrade and or destroy 3 nuclear sites inside of Iran. One of them had 60% enriched uranium. 60%. Remember, you only need like 3.67% for a nuclear power plant. You only need 20% enriched, very small quantities for like medical isotopes and that kind of thing. The only countries in the world that have anything close to 60% enriched uranium are countries that have nuclear weapons. They have stored 60% enriched uranium in one facility there called Esfahan. They were threatening to create even more of it. And then they had all these centrifuges that were capable of enriching up to weapons grade at 90%, buried in mountains. I know, but it's all for peaceful purposes. Give me a break. Everybody gets it. Unfortunately, they've been able to get away with that game for a long time. Those were the objectives last night. We hit 3 nuclear-related sites controlled by the Iranian regime. And now what happens next will depend on what Iran does next and the regime does next. If they attack us, it would be a terrible mistake on their part. There are they are completely vulnerable. They don't control their own airspace. They can't protect their own airspace. They can't even protect their own leaders. So I think it would be a big mistake if they did anything against us. But look, they'll have to make that decision, and the president will respond accordingly and decisively. But no one, after last night, should be under any illusions. When Donald Trump says he's going to do something, when the president says this president says he's going to do something, he's not just wasting words. He means it.
So, was it fair to say they were 1 week away from having a nuclear weapon, and is that all destroyed at this point? Is that gone?
I think it's fair to say they have everything you need to make a nuclear weapon, everything. They have the enrichment capability. They have highly enriched uranium in sufficient quantities to make at least 9 or 10 bombs. All they have to do is spend a couple days enriching it from 60 to 90%. We're certain they have a weapons design. They have mid-range missiles. They have short-range missiles that they could put warheads on. And by the way, they claim to have a space program. It's not a space program. Iran's not going to the moon. They have a space program because they're trying to develop ICBMs, long-range rockets.
Oh God! Oh man! Marco Rubio said Iran isn't going to the moon. No, they ain't. Tell you that much. They're not. Nope. They're not going to the moon. Tell you that much. Marco Rubio.
That could one day reach the United States the way North Korea can already reach the United States with their ICBMs. That's what they're working on. They have all the pieces in place to have a nuclear weapon. All that's missing is flipping the switch. But in terms of all you things you need, all the structures, all the science, all of that, they had it all in place. Now, not so much. And that's why we did the world a great favor. Or we would all wake up one day in less than a decade in a world where radical Shia clerics control nuclear weapons capable of reaching not just the Middle East, but all of Europe and potentially the east coast of the United States. That is an unacceptable risk. There's no way we were leaving that for future generations.
Secretary, final question here. Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that.
Ooh-wee. Told you, Marco Rubio, this man is a force to reckon with. All right, shout out to the GOAT. Luke, Dr. Luke, God bless you. Thank you, GOAT. He said, Trump has my support. We needed a real life hero. Trump had a checkered past, but now he has the truth, the way, and the life. Ooh, Dr. Luke, the laborers are coming for you now. When you start going that route, yeah. Dr. Luke, they're coming for you. Okay, the GOAT. Shout out to the GOAT. Thank you, Dr. Luke.
That it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that. But other countries should be looking at that as well. It would hurt other countries' economies a lot worse than ours. It would be, I think, a massive escalation that would merit a response, not just by us, but from others. So, look, they're going to say what they need to say. You know, these are the things that need to happen for their own internal politics and so forth. But in the end, we're going to judge them by the actions that they take moving forward. We had 3 objectives. We struck those 3 objectives with decisive force. And that was the point of this mission. And that's what we achieved. What happens next will depend on what they do. They want to negotiate. We're ready to negotiate. They want to get cute and do things that are dangerous. We have responses available that are devastating.
They want to get cute? Oh man, Marco Rubio.
Secretary, was China complicit? We know that jets flew into Iran. We don't know what were on those jets.
No, we don't have any evidence that the Chinese were involved in anything other than perhaps trying to get Chinese nationals out of Iran.
Okay. Secretary, thank you very much for.
All right. You've heard Marco Rubio. Look, like I mentioned before, the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, did not attack the Iranian people. Absolutely not. He gave an order to get rid of the nuclear site in Iran, not the people. So get it straight, because a lot of people don't notice things. He did not attack Iranian people. He only gave a precise order to go after the nuclear site. So keep calm, relax, and have some belief and some faith, okay? That your leader, President Trump, is actually doing the right thing. Give him some time. Just cut him some slack, okay? Cut him some slack. Be patient and see what's gonna happen. Relax, okay? Let this play out and see what's gonna happen. Just calm down.
Let's keep going here. Hours after the U.S. strike, the Iranian regime resumed targeting the citizens in Israel. They're fighting a very different war. They're not going after military targets or anything like that. They are shooting at people. They are sending those missiles into major civilian areas, some 27 overnight around Tel Aviv and Haifa. Israel's health ministry says at least 80 people were badly injured in some cases in those overnight strikes. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yinks is in Tel Aviv. Trey.
Harris, good morning. Hours after President Trump ordered those U.S. strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, the Iranians launched a large-scale ballistic missile attack against Israel, sending millions of people into bomb shelters. Nearly 30 missiles soaring through the skies of this country. According to first responders, there were 10 different impact sites and more than 80 people wounded. A number of residential buildings were destroyed. First responders going to the scene, digging through the rubble, trying to find people who survived these blasts. We do understand that the Israelis remain today on high alert, fearing more Iranian responses. And there is a state of emergency here, warning civilians to stay out of public gatherings. Schools are closed and businesses shuttered. This is what Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to say in response to the American strikes.
History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace.
The Iranians have responded saying all options are on the table about a possible response to the U.S. strikes overnight. And the country's foreign minister releasing a statement saying, quote, last week we were in negotiations with the U.S. when Israel decided to blow up that diplomacy. This week we held talks with the E3 EU when the U.S. decided to blow up that diplomacy. What conclusion would you draw? Again, American forces and the Israelis remain on high alert across the region. There's real concern about a possible response that could come at any moment. And we do understand that both current and former Israeli officials continue to praise President Trump for this decision, understanding that it has changed the reality for the Middle East, going after these key nuclear sites in Iran and taking away that important piece of leverage that the regime had just 24 hours ago related to their nuclear program. Harris?
Trey, I'm curious. You said through your reporting that all options are on the table for Iran. What does that even mean at this point? And are they hitting Israel in a way that they anticipated? Is it bigger? I know they're hitting civilians, and that is horrible, and they can continue to do that. But I had been reading maybe they wouldn't have as much in terms of weaponry at this point.
Yeah, Harris, you're exactly right. And I spoke on the phone earlier with Israel's former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, and he said it would be a grave mistake for the Iranians to respond to these strikes overnight that were ordered by President Trump. They do have some limited capability to continue targeting Israeli population centers with ballistic missiles. They could also use their proxies in the region, these Iran-backed Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias, to go after U.S. bases or embassies in the Middle East. But the key thing to remember here is that over the past year and a half, the Israelis have systematically taken out Iranian proxies like Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. The Americans and the Israelis have gone after the Houthis in Yemen. They've targeted Hamas and Islamic Jihad inside Gaza, and it has given the Iranians very limited options in terms of a response. The situation has changed. If we were having this conversation 2 years ago, Israel would fear a massive missile attack from multiple directions. Right now, they just have to brace for the possibility of more ballistic missile fire from Iran and the chance that Iran could try to mobilize what's left of their proxy forces in the region to launch limited strikes against population centers here or American interests across the region.
Yeah,
Harris?
I wanted to know about their reach in terms of all of those 40,000+ American personnel and some even their families in the region as well. So we'll get into that with Joey Jones. You set it up perfectly. I'm so appreciative of your reporting always, Trey. Thank you. In focus now, Joey Jones, retired Marine bomb technician and Fox News contributor. So let's talk about the exposure, if you will, of our men and women in the military in that region right now. And are we more worried or less, do you think, at this point?
I think you have to be a little bit more worried today. You don't know what Iran's going to do. You have Soleimani as an example. We had a guest on Fox and Friends this morning, and he kind of tried to thread the needle and said he thought they would do more than what they did after Soleimani, but try not to do too much to create a reaction from us. My guessing at it is, do they try to go after capabilities rather than personnel? Do they want American?
Shout out to the GOAT. Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. And I think what you just put up here is very important for every American to read, as well as Iranians, or anybody across the world, actually. So Dr. Luke said Trump sent a focused attack on the offensive weapons program, not the 100 million Iranians. That is very important for everybody to actually understand. There are actually 100 million Iranian living in Iran. He's not targeting those people. He will never target those people. It's only after the offensive weapons program, just like Dr. Luke pointed out. So everybody keep calm, relax, okay? And understand that your commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, is actually a man that is not thirsty for war. He's just seeking for peace. And that's just the facts.
Blood, or do they want a PR win after they've been embarrassed on the international stage? I don't know. I don't even know what capabilities they have left.
That's my question.
And so that's a big part of it as well. So it's not a wait and see, it's a wait and hope, I think.
Okay, so this is important. From that Secretary Rubio interview with Maria Bartiromo, he told her there are no planned military operations right now against Iran. That sounds like a really open window if they will step in and take it for negotiations.
Yeah, there's soundbite after soundbite from Secretary Hegseth's press conference this morning. I mean, he said very matter-of-factly the president wants them to come to the negotiation table, and he says they know the steps they need to take for peace. Now, he didn't tell us what those steps are, but that was in response to a question about, is the Trump administration directly communicating with Iran's leadership? And he said yes.
All right, next one, because I've been pulling just headlines in the last 11 minutes now as the sun is setting in that part of the world, as you saw. It's after 6 p.m. there. So the IAEA chief, Grossi, was telling another network they cannot assess the damage underground at Iran's Fordo. Okay, they cannot, do you think? Or they're not being allowed to? Or what is the situation? Because they didn't have eyes on it before all this.
It could be both. It could be that the damage is such that there isn't a direct path in there to see.
And we hope that.
And probably nobody's getting an invitation into Iran right now to inspect nuclear facilities, no matter where they're from. I would imagine, and what we keep hearing is Israel has boots on the ground there in some form or fashion, and probably plans to do a battle damage assessment of some sort.
Okay, I figured. I mean, the IAEA had an opportunity to do more than be duplicitous at one point. They really,
put out,
you and I have talked
they
about
put out
this
one report in May that really changed a lot of things, that said for the first time that Iran had violated any agreement they had. But I think that's 20 years too late.
Yeah, that's the problem. All right, one last one here. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, we're familiar with it because there are millions of Muslims that they say they speak for. Here's what they say. They have now set up a contact group for regular contact with regional international parties to support de-escalation efforts to stop the aggression against Iran and seek peaceful settlement. You've been hearing a lot about people not liking how this is going because they're for the Islamic regime.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Arab nations, some of the biggest ones, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the first statement they put out, and I think the other one was Qatar, they all stopped shy of condemning or almost taking a side. They all said, we need to find a peaceful resolution, essentially. But then you've got the Secretary General of the United Nations coming out and pointing the ire directly at the United States, as if the United States was the only bad actor or the bad actor in the situation. So it's almost like President Trump's tour of the Middle East has flipped the table a little bit.
Well, no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, he's keeping his promises. I don't think the world is used to that. The New York Times with this headline, with military strike, his predecessors avoided. Trump takes a huge gamble. President Trump is betting the United States can repel whatever retaliation Iran orders, and that it has destroyed the regime's chances of reconstituting its nuclear program. Your take on that?
Yeah, phrasing it that way, like it's very open-ended, we absolutely can. In a conventional war, we are the world's superpower. And with what Iran has left, if we so wanted, we could absolutely destroy their military. That doesn't mean we'd do it without any losses of our own. Doesn't mean that the troops and the ships that we have in the region aren't susceptible to a missile getting lucky and striking one of them, honestly. But the frame it as President Trump takes a big risk. I think this is the most calculated thing he's done when it comes to war. I mean, we got to understand that this is the same president that did not start a new war, that ended the war against ISIS, but also set a precedent using the Moab, and now has set a precedent using the MOP. So he understands, I guess we've, just to use the tagline, they do peace through strength, this idea that if you are decisive and immediate and severe with your action, maybe you don't have to have a prolonged war.
Yeah, I like the acronym for the massive ordinance. they mopped it up.
Yeah,
yes. Joey, good to see you. Thank
yes,
you.
ma'am.
Of course, we do not advocate for chaos. It's not what we stand for. We actually advocate for peace. However, everybody knows Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. All right, the GOAT just striked again.
We want to bring in.
I'm about to read what the GOAT, Dr. Luke, just put in the chat. So, Dr. Luke, the GOAT, says, no boots on the ground yet, people. I will be angry if Trump has a 20-year war. But so far, only the Trump detractors think that will happen. Only the Trump detractors think that will happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to send boots on the ground because why would he do that? The mission is to denuclearize Iran, which has been done last night or 2 nights ago. So calm down. And everybody knows, just like the GOAT's just mentioned in the chat right now, no boots on the ground. All right. And if he actually does that, then he's changed the equation of all of this. So I doubt that would happen, but you never know. Let's keep watching, but I doubt that would happen.
And now our Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired 4-star General Jack Keane, joining us now here in the studio. General, that remarkable press conference, the tactics used, the deception, and the fact that we got in flawlessly, struck our targets, as according to Secretary Hegseth, it appears we hit every intended target objective, and yet got out without a single shot being fired at us.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we got a congratulations to our troops in that execution, and the complexity of that operation is obvious. And also, let's commend the President of the United States. He showed enormous strategic patience in trying to work this with the Iranians so that they would dismantle their nuclear enterprise.
Exactly. He gave Iran 60 days to make a deal. Why is everybody not talking about the 60 days? Nobody seems to remember that he tried to make a deal with Iran for 60 days, ladies and gentlemen. All of a sudden, he's the bad guy. All right.
But at the end of the day, we had to help the Israelis dismantle it. That's the facts on the ground. I think the operation had 4 major characteristics of it to help it be successful. One was the operational security of the operation. And that is really tough to maintain in our open, democratic society that we have. And we know that things do have a tendency to leak out.
Everything leaks in Washington.
And then everybody, listen, for the last week or two has been focused on this operation, and yet it didn't leak. The deception helped considerably in that, in terms of the missile. I mean, the planes flying initially west, but the actual planes flew east to the target. I think the president contributed to the deception operation as well when he said, well, I'm going to make a decision in a couple of weeks. The truth of the matter was the decision was already made or made very close to that statement he made. And everybody was thinking there was time here. And then characteristic of military operations, when we're going after something that we have to destroy, to ensure that we use overwhelming force. And you saw that. Most everyone was saying 2 to 3 of these MOPs were going to be used, 14.
Yeah.
Multiple aircraft to deliver all of those, and then the additional missiles, and taking down 3 targets that the Israelis wanted help on, not just 1. And then the thing that was emphasized is the flawless execution. And I think the audience had a complexity, got a feel for the complexity of military operations. And I really applaud the chairman for providing those details. And I want to tell you, what you folks have been doing here on Fox and Friends Weekend since this got started about 3 or 4 hours ago is really outstanding. Well done.
Well, thank you, General. And having you here is so beneficial because you understand these. And I think the real question, General, is, okay, so what now are the strategic implications of this strike? We obviously didn't get much BDA, battle damage assessment, from the Pentagon briefing. It's going to take some time. We'll learn that. But just initially, what do you see as the strategic implications?
That's a great question. You know, it's pretty significant opportunity, actually. Obviously, the threat of nuclear weapons being used against Israel, the United States, as Iran has threatened, or Europe, which would clearly be in range of their ballistic missiles, that is about off the table. The second thing is, and this is serious, no nuclear arms race in the Middle East as a result of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon, which would have happened. The Arabs are not going to say this publicly, but they are relieved about what has just happened here. And the other thing is, we are on the cusp of actually ending Iran's malign and aggressive behavior in the region, Griff, that has existed for 45 years. And you have outlined the killing of Americans from 1983 all the way up to the 350 attacks that Iran delivered on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria during the 4 years of the Biden administration, and not one time did they ever accept General Kurilla's recommendation to strike Iran to stop that from happening. And so the implications here are very serious in terms of the opportunities for peace and stability. Iran is isolated in a way that we've never seen in the 45 years. The proxies have not supported them at all. Think of that. Iran is on its heels. Their very survival is in question as a regime. And
Shout out to Dr. Luke, the GOAT. He just striked again and he says, Dams, don't you actually have violent people on your side? That's a question. Okay. Because we've seen the protest with the looting and the violent act, burning down cars, throwing rocks at federal agent because you are not in support of deportations. Okay. So, according to the GOAT, Dams, don't you actually have violent people on your side, which they actually do? Focus on your house first, please. And this isn't what Americans should be doing. We should not be fighting against each other. We should be together as one. Because I don't understand how some Americans are supporting Iran. What are you doing?
As a military organization, as the IRGC controlling the proxies and supporting the region, all of that is on the table. None of them have come into their assistance. The Hezbollah was organized principally to defend Iran against an attack from Israel. Billions of dollars spent on them, 150,000 missiles. I've talked to the Israelis and said, what is going on with Hezbollah? Why haven't they fired? Do they have any missiles? Yes. Answer, they have thousands of missiles left. Why haven't they? He said, sir, their will is broken. Wow. And they can see what is happening to Iran. Why are they going to risk all now? The Israelis will come back at them when they believe Iran is close to being finished. You know, and then the isolation. Where is Russia and China, Griff?
Yeah.
This axis has been formed. Those four nations, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Where are they? They have provided no military assistance to Iran whatsoever. Huge opportunity here to move forward and take advantage of it in terms of peace and stability in the region.
Well, and, you know, you mentioned Russia and China. You know, the Wall Street Journal has an editorial early this morning, Mr. Trump meets the moment. And it's really talking about American deterrence being back. And, you know, you saw the greatest military the world's ever seen on display flawlessly in the last 24 hours. What message does that send? Is America once again a global leader in terms of deterrence?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when President Trump came back into office, the major geopolitical change that he was coping with, and it is China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea forming an alliance together to cooperate because they saw opportunity. They believed that American leadership under the former president was weak, and they could take advantage of that weakness. It's not isolated that Putin went into Ukraine. It's not isolated that Iran operationalizes all of its proxies to once and for all go after Israel and bring that country down. And President Xi is preparing for war, and he keeps threatening war. And during those previous 4 years, the intimidation and coercion on his part in the Pacific has accelerated dramatically. This operation by itself, even though it's limited in terms of what we are doing and certainly limited in terms of what our geopolitical objectives here, we're not going to invade Iran, we're not going to occupy it, we're certainly not going to do any nation building. We just want them to stop. And I think we'll achieve that. What a message this sends to our allies and partners around the world, certainly the Arabs in the region, but also Taiwan, the Europeans, et cetera, watching this. What really are they seeing? They're seeing the President of the United States come to the assistance of a partner and ally who needs our help and who is being challenged in their very existence. And the United States has their back and has stepped up and used force. That is what is being seen. Our adversaries see, and you said it, the return of American global leadership in a way that they can no longer take advantage of like they have been doing for the past 4 years. And they've been getting away with it, and we all have seen it. So this is a step in the right direction. I mean, it's not a fait accompli in that sense, right, but they will change their assessments as a result. I believe when President Trump got elected, they had to rethink what's going to happen here in terms of what we have on the table and what are our objectives. Now they have to make another assessment back on based on the fact that President Trump has used force to eliminate a nuclear threat to Israel, to the region, to the world writ large, and they are on notice as a result of it.
On notice. General, let me ask you really now, as we wait to see if Iran will strike, will they hit one of our bases, al-Assad in Iraq? Will they go after Bahrain? What do you anticipate will be the response?
We don't know. So it's their choice to make. But I'm confident the message that has been delivered to Iran that we are conducting a limited one-off airstrike in support of Israel's operation. We are not going to war with you. If you retaliate against us and hurt people at our bases or our capabilities at those bases, then you're going to have to deal with massive consequences as a result of that action. I believe based on where Iran is, and they're so much back on their heels, their military leadership has been decapitated. Their civilian leadership is in hiding, buried under the ground, and the psychological and emotional impact that would have on that person in terms of what is happening to them and what they're used to having in their normal everyday life will take its toll. I think they will recognize that they cannot afford to do what people are suggesting, a massive strike on the United States, which would result in our significant, overwhelming response. And that would put their regime's survival at risk, not in terms of us bringing down the regime, but in terms of them being so politically weakened as a result of everything they care about being destroyed, that people will look for opportunities to take that regime over.
Well, and obviously we saw Iran responded after we took out Soleimani. So we can expect maybe something will come. But, you know, I'll tell you, General, I spent weeks, months over the last 4 years out in places like the San Diego sector. I encountered English-speaking Iranians, Syrians. My colleague Bill Malusian and I did too. I now am talking to some DHS sources, worrying about, you know, is there a threat of a cell or someone being activated, or even a smaller individualized motivated person to try and strike us here at home?
Yeah. The FBI has some concerns about that, and obviously Senator Cotton, who's the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has mentioned that. So I'm assuming that threat is real. But I also have a lot of confidence in our counterintelligence capability. One, the fact that they're recognizing that threat does exist means that they're onto something. And the fact that they revealed it to the American people was interesting in of itself. So I have confidence in that system, and hopefully that they'll be able to prevent anything like that from happening. I think the more realistic thing that would happen is some kind of missile retaliation by the Iranians.
Yeah, and we probably can expect that. I want to bring you back to that just a little bit because, General, there's so much of discussion in this about, well, there is legitimate questions and concerns of being drawn into something else. And remember of what happened to Iraq and in Afghanistan. But it seems to me that the intelligence this time is clear, and it's against an enemy. You're dealing with an enemy who is the undisputed number one global, terrorist on the globe. And so they've been chanting, as we've pointed out, for 4.5 decades, death to America and killing Americans. But now we have the IAEA intelligence. It came out in this May 31 report where, for the first time in 20 years, inspectors still in Iran under the non-nuclear proliferation treaty. Remember, JCPOA went away, but the inspectors did stay. On their limited knowledge, they say that we had literally enrichment happening up to, well, here's what they say. They say the fact that Iran is the only non-nuclear weapon state in the world that is producing and accumulating uranium enriched to 60% remains a serious concern. For our viewers, 20% is what you need perhaps for energy. 60% is a short distance from the 90% weapons grade. And they end the report this way, General. Unless and until Iran assists the agency in resolving the outstanding issues, the agency will not be in a position to provide assurance that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. It seems that that's going to be a part of what woke us up about it.
Well, I think that, and Israel's intelligence as well. I think some of the statements that came out of our intelligence services about they haven't made a decision is absolutely ludicrous. Based on the fact that they also would make that they're 2 weeks from being able to assemble the enough enriched uranium to weaponize it and make it into a weapon. Well, haven't they already made a decision to do that? And so I totally discount the conclusion that a decision hasn't been made, because if they made the decision today, 2 weeks from now, they would have what they wanted. And we wouldn't even notice it. It would be the same thing that happened in North Korea when they did it. Going back to the escalation thing, and I know some of your colleagues are concerned about this, when a president is considering what he did here today, and he knows that the enemy has a vote, and that they can come back and escalate as a result of it, and then our leaders walk the president through the options that we have based on size, scale, and impact of the enemy's escalation. And we have options, and we walk him through.
Exactly. What do you think is happening? He knows multiple options that may happen before the strike was done. Before he gave that order, he knew what may happen. So what do you think? He doesn't know? This is the United States, y'all. Everybody needs to understand that this is the greatest country on the face of the earth. The intelligence the United States has, no other country has it. So you think the United States doesn't know how Iran may or may not retaliate? Come on, y'all. Come on, man.
Through all of that. And obviously there can be a walk up the escalation ladder, which is the concern that people have. But you have to ask this fundamental question. Obama and Biden were both paralyzed by the fear of adverse consequence, the fear of escalation and what it would imply. And it paralyzed them. This president has not paralyzed them. And the reason is he'll ask the next question when they take him through the escalation. Well, what is the impact of us doing nothing? Take me through what is the impact of doing nothing? And that is what leads you to overcome your fear, which is a natural human experience when you're dealing with these and you're president of the United States and you have people's lives at risk, literally based on your decision here. But when you ask that question and you get the response and the danger it meant to Israel, the danger to the American people writ large, and the danger it meant to the Europeans, our soldiers are in uniform and we're expecting them to take risk. They have come forward and put their life on the line to defend this country. They are a small population resenting the strong values that we have. And we are asking them to accept that risk so we can protect the American people and the state of Israel. And they will willingly accept that risk.
And our appreciation and admiration for those pilots and those sailors and everybody out there in this operation. General Jack Keane, insightful and great as always.
And that's why we got to say, and that's why I always say, thank you to the veterans. Thank you to the military personnel, because this is a very delicate job. Okay. So thank you for your service every single time, every single day. You guys protect the homeland. Without the military, without our veterans, we would have no homeland in the first place. So, once again, thank you to the military personnel. Thank you to the veterans. God bless you for your service. All right.
Joining me now, Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, who serves on both the Senate Armed Services Committee and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Shannon.
So prior to the action yesterday, you had introduced a war powers resolution. You want to put this to a vote in the Senate. My colleague, former federal prosecutor Andy McCarthy, has written at length about this over the last few days. He argues the current authorization of use of military force that's been in effect since 2001 has been used by presidents of both parties, gives this president authority to go after any entity that aided or abetted the attackers of 9/11. He says that's where Iran gets drawn in. He writes this: in terms of the AUMF, there's no doubt that Iran aided and abetted al-Qaeda as it planned and executed the 9/11 attacks, and that Iran harbored al-Qaeda in the aftermath of those attacks, which led to future acts of international terrorism against the U.S. The AUMF thus endows President Trump with legal authority. Again, he talks about presidents of both parties using it. Jonathan Turley, who will be on the show later, also writes that there are a lot of more recent direct attacks that Iran and its proxies have had on Americans. So why does that AUMF not work? Is it time to get rid of it?
Shannon, the Senate has already ruled that the 2001 AUMF does not cover action against Iran, because I filed a similar resolution a few years ago, and we had to battle this out before the parliamentarian. It's clear that there is no congressional authorization for Trump's war against Iran. And I have filed a resolution that I think will get a vote later this week. I thank Senator Schumer for pushing that we have a vote on this as soon as possible. And we will have all members of the Senate have to declare whether or not the U.S. should be at war with Iran. It's unconstitutional for a president to initiate a war like this without Congress. Every member of Congress needs to vote on this.
Okay, let me play something from one of your GOP colleagues last night. This is Senator Markwayne Mullin to that argument.
Underneath Article 2, it has been debated and had been put into court multiple times on what exactly the length of war powers have, with the president having to come to Congress before he committed troops. We didn't commit necessarily troops here, but it also goes on to say, according to court rulings, that if we are attacked, the commander-in-chief, not the president of the United States at the time, but now he becomes commander-in-chief, has the authority and the ability to protect Americans home and abroad if we feel threatened or attacked, including our assets. There is no question Iran has threatened us, and there is no question they have attacked us. This is well within the president's authority to be able to do just exactly what he's doing.
So, Senator, he'll be likely a no vote on your resolution. Do you think any other Republicans, though, cross the aisle with you?
Yes, we will have Republican votes. How many, I don't know. There's going to be a briefing on Tuesday. Look, America was lied into a war in 2002 against Iraq with a Republican administration giving us false information about Iraq's weapons program. I have grave concern that we're going down the same path. Donald Trump's own national security officials have stated that Iran was not close to having a nuclear weapon. And Shannon, just Friday night, the Israeli foreign minister said that its bombing campaign over the last 9 days had set back the Iranian nuclear program by at least 2 or 3 years. There was no imminent threat to the United States from this nuclear program. It was an offensive war of choice by a president without consultation with Congress. We're going to have the briefing this week. We'll have a vote. I know many Republicans will fall in line and say a president can do whatever he wants, but I hope members of the Senate and the House will take their Article 1 responsibility seriously and say, you didn't even notify us, much less get an authorization. The U.S. should not be at war without a vote of Congress.
Okay, I wonder, to your point about Israel inflicting so much damage on Iran's nuclear program, I want to read something from the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. They say that what the president did helped rid the world of a grave nuclear threat was a large step toward restoring U.S. deterrence. It creates an opportunity, they said, for more peace in the Middle East. But they note this, leaving Iran with a hardened nuclear enrichment facility after an Israeli military.
So I just seen a comment in the chat. Shout out to Terry. Shout out to Terry. She said to support Iran is not American. How can you support a regime that shouts and screams death to America? You are Americans. You support that kind of regime? How is that even possible? How can you do that as an American? I don't get it.
Military campaign would have been a recipe for maximum danger, all but asking Iran to sprint to the bomb. Your reaction?
That's an argument that you could make to Congress and have a debate in full view of the American people so they can decide whether they want to risk American lives for this, particularly with the Israeli foreign minister saying the program had been set back 2 or 3 years. There was no need for President Trump to rush this on his own. And again, we believe, as a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committee, I think some of what President Trump is saying about the Iranian nuclear program is directly contrary to what his own national security officials are saying and what Israeli officials are saying. But if they believe this is something we should do, great. Bring it to Congress in the way that the framers intended. Our framers did not believe in the old way that a king could order a nation to war.
Man, please.
Instead, the framers gave the power to Congress so that we would have a debate in front of all the American public whose sons and daughters' lives could potentially be at risk. And that's the biggest worry I have this morning, the risk to American troops and citizens and diplomatic personnel in the region, the risk to regional stability. We thought taking out the Iraqi government was going to make the region safer. It made it worse. This could lead to more nuclear escalation. It could hurt the global economy, and it risks America's reputation that we are seen as the one that wants to tear up diplomacy and instead result to military power first.
Okay, so to the issue of whether or not there was a true impending threat with regard to the nuclear program, you know, the IAEA just weeks ago, the UN security watchdog on matters of nuclear issues, they issued a scathing report. They talked about the fact that there have been numerous violations by Iran dating back to 2019. They said they couldn't explain traces of nuclear material that had been found at undeclared sites.
All right,
they
here we
were
go.
never given full access. They said there was extensive sanitization and the provision of inaccurate explanations about what was going on. That's not a conservative body. That's not a pro-Trump body, as you know, but they had grave concerns that Iran's program was potentially wildly far advanced beyond what they would ever be able to ascertain.
And Shannon, you mentioned the date correctly, 2019. There have been challenges since 2019. What happened before 2019? Donald Trump tore up the diplomatic deal that imposed limits on Iranian centrifuges, limits on Iranian enrichment activity, and imposed significant inspections on Iranian facilities. After Donald Trump chose to tear up a deal that was working, his own cabinet members said he should not tear up the deal. Yes, we all predicted Iran would race ahead and do things that they shouldn't. But the IAEA has never found that Iran was close to developing a nuclear weapon.
Every single time, Democrats always say the same thing. Trump tore up the deal. Same thing they said about him concerning the border. Remember? Kamala kept campaigning about Trump is the reason why people are running into the country. Trump is the reason why people are pouring into the country. He tore up the deal. He killed the deal. The border deal. He killed the deal. Now on Iran, he killed the deal. It's always Trump killing the deal. Okay. Liberals. Oh my goodness.
Israeli foreign minister and U.S.
Oh,
security
man.
officials also have not suggested that Iran was close to developing a nuclear weapon. Only President Trump and a few of his, kind of acolytes are saying that. We'll get into it more when we have an all-senators briefing this week. But I was very struck, again, on Friday night when the Israeli foreign minister said, we've set him back 2 to 3 years. That allowed for time for the president to get the American public and Congress on board if it was a worthy mission. Instead, he chose to make it Trump's war on his own. And I fear deeply we're being misled about this, just as we were before we tragically got into a war with Iraq.
Well, he says his priority as the commander-in-chief is protecting the American public, our military, our civilians all around the world, and that this was a strike in his assessment. It was time to make. You'll have that briefing this week. You'll undoubtedly have some type of debate over the war powers as well. We will follow all of that closely and see where your colleagues come down as well. Senator, thank you for the time.
Oh man, the chat is way too funny. See, Americans. I support America, yet they don't like me. I mean, I don't know. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Here we go.
Joining us now, Oklahoma Senator James Lankford, member of the Senate Intel Committee and Homeland Security Committees. Senator, welcome to Fox News Sunday. You heard what your colleague there had to say from the other side of the aisle. I don't think anybody is excited or supportive of a, quote, war in the Middle East. So what happens next?
Yeah, certainly we're not excited about a war in the Middle East, and no one's looking for a war in the Middle East. And President Trump has made it very clear he's not trying to be able to start a war in the Middle East. He's trying to be able to protect American lives around the world. People forget there are 700,000 Americans that are in Israel right now, and they're facing an onslaught. We've had 174 attacks on American warships right off the coast of Yemen with the Iranian.
Shout out to the GOAT. Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. It says, good thing Congress discredited themselves during Trump's first term. America knows how irrational the Dems are with Trump. Trump's team is amazing. Of course, they discredited Trump and themselves. But in discrediting Trump, they actually destroyed themselves. They destroyed themselves. So Americans are like, you know what? Trump, do your thing. Do your thing. They try to put you in jail. Guess what? He is the commander-in-chief right now. He had 2 assassination attempts on his life. Guess what? He's still here. God protected this man for a reason. Can we just allow this happen? Let this man do what he was sent here to do. Can we just believe that he was sent here to actually get this job done?
Weapons. We've had multiple attacks on Americans in the region in Iraq just in the past few months. So we have faced a tremendous amount of inbound attacks from Iran. So I think the president's shown incredible restraint. And as for the argument that somehow Iran is a long way from a nuclear weapon, I think everybody's skipping over the International Atomic Energy Agency just May the 30th said that Iran is 2 days away. At that point, they said it's May the 30th, 2 days away from having their first weapons-grade uranium. They also found evidence of a weapons manufacturing technology that's happening. So all of this thought about they're a long way away from it. 2 days doesn't seem like a long way away from having their first weapons-grade uranium. They might have been a month away from having a dozen, but not for their first. And all it takes is having their first ready. The president's been very, very clear they cannot have a nuclear weapon. In fact, that has been a bipartisan statement that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon for a very long time.
I'm going to play a little bit of something from Iran's foreign minister speaking a short time ago, talking about also that he's going to meet with President Vladimir Putin of Russia today. Here's what Iran's foreign minister had to say.
While President Trump was elected on a platform of putting an end to America's costly involvement of forever wars in our part of the world, he has betrayed not only Iran by abusing our commitment to diplomacy, but also deceived his own voters by submitting to the wishes of a wanted war criminal who has grown accustomed to exploiting the lives and wealth of American citizens to further the Israeli regime's objectives.
Not surprising that's how the Iran foreign minister would term all of that. But what do you make now of him taking that attitude to go meet with Putin and their strategic partnership those two countries say they've got?
Yeah, right now, Putin is slaughtering the Ukrainians next door using Iranian weapons, as they have done for a very long time now through this war. And so it is not surprising that the two of them continue to be able to ally together. The challenge that we have right now is we cannot have a nuclear armed Iran. We cannot have an Iran that is the largest state sponsor of terrorism, that continues to be able to develop new technologies to be able to attack their neighbors. We cannot allow them to be able to have a nuclear weapon. That has been clear. President Biden said that, but did nothing about it. President Trump has said that. President Obama said that before. This cannot be allowed. And President Trump has been the one to be able to take the strong action to say,
Even Hillary Clinton said the same thing. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if she was president, she would actually destroy the nuclear sites. So I don't get it why Democrats are now saying, oh, Trump, because it's Trump. As long as it's Trump, of course, they're not going to support him.
they've done one thing. They've stopped the nuclear weapons program there. And what has been very clear is in Fordo, that deep mountain, that there's no way to be able to stop it without American support. So contrary to popular statements here, to be able to say the Israelis have somehow set back the Iranians where they couldn't advance that program, everyone's been very clear. Fordo is the location where they've been advancing their nuclear technology towards weaponization. That spot could only be taken out by American forces. The president's taken that one spot out and has said now it's time to be able to actually come to the table, because Iran for months has refused to be able to make an agreement to be able to eliminate those nuclear weapons. So we eliminate their capability for them.
So what about Senator Kaine's point? And he's not the only one making it. There are others who have said that President Trump bears some responsibility for where we found ourselves because of his withdrawal from the earlier agreement and the fact that it gave Iran some autonomy with proceeding without some of the guardrails or inspections it would have had otherwise.
So they've continued to have inspections. The International Atomic Energy Agency continued to be able to have their cameras, their inspection devices, their technology that was in those locations. Iran is the one that actually took those apart several months ago. Again, we go back to President Obama that actually made this agreement that allowed over 10 years Iran to continue their nuclear technology and to have a 10-year time period until they could actually get to a bomb. President Trump stepped in and said, no, we're not going to give you 10 years time period. You can't have a bomb at all. You can't continue your nuclear work on this. So President Trump set that aside. President Biden came back and said, well, we'll negotiate again. Maybe we'll allow you to be able to have that. President Trump came back again, as the American people asked him to do, and said, you cannot have a nuclear weapon. This is not about they can't do their nuclear power. Of course they could do nuclear power, but every single country that has nuclear power, including Iran, that power is actually supplied, that uranium is supplied from the source that actually set up the actual nuclear power plant. This Iran is trying to be the only country in the world saying we're trying to only do peaceful power, but also produce their own uranium. They're also producing uranium at highly enriched levels that no other country in the world, unless they have a nuclear weapon, actually has. There's no question Iran was working towards having a nuclear weapon. That is without question. Everyone knows it that looks at the data on this. The question is, will they be allowed to be able to actually finish their work to be able to do that? President Trump said, no, you cannot do that for the security of the entire world and of American citizens living in that region.
So, of course, this quickly turned political, as these issues will. Last night, an account attributed to Congressman Sean Casten, not his official account, but one that's personal. It's not verified, but it says this. This is not about the merits of Iran's nuclear program. No president has the authority to bomb another country that does not pose an imminent threat to the U.S. without the approval of Congress. This is an unambiguous, impeachable offense. Do you think we're headed down that road again?
If Democrats get control of Congress, we are most certainly headed towards impeachment again. That has been the playbook that they've played twice on President Trump. So certainly, if they get control of Congress in this next election, they will work towards impeachment. That's their favorite play to be able to do. This is something
Every
Bernie
single
Sanders
time.
has talked about. This is something Representative Ocasio-Cortez has talked about. This is something now that Senator Tim Kaine is talking about. Not impeachment, but just we're going to find a way to be able to block the president from protecting American citizens in that region and to be able to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon. The same country that operates Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Shia militias that are in Iraq that attacked American citizens, all those attacks that are on American warships that are coming through the Gulf. That same entity is the same one that's developing a nuclear weapon and chanting at the same time, death to America. That is a threat, and the president has to make a difficult decision to say when is the moment to be able to prevent that threat from happening. The 9/11 doctrine that we came down to in America said we are not going to wait until another country attacks us. If we know they plan and intend to attack us, we're going to stop them to be able to protect American lives. We don't want to go to war, but we're not going to allow you to attack us.
Yeah, and we'll.
There you have it. There you have it. Trump will protect America. That's his duty.
All right, well, let's bring in Sean Hannity, our friend. He just spoke to President Trump last night, and he joins us now with more about that conversation. Good morning, Sean. What did the president tell you?
Good morning. Well, before I get to the president, I really was paying very close attention to everything that Jennifer Griffin was reporting here. The deception, the intelligence, the planning, the precision, the Tomahawks, the B-2s, the bunker buster bombs. If you just pause and think of the minutia, the level of detail, the precision, every American should be very proud today of every man and woman that works in our military and everybody that was part of the planning and an operation that took place so successfully last night. The fact that all of this went undetected. You can hear in the level of detail every single aspect of it. You hear danger. This was something I was warning about, Rachel, last week, that there is no military effort that does not have danger associated with it. I can add one little bit of context I can add to the specific detail that Jennifer went into, which was so comprehensive, and it should make, again, every American proud. But I can say they were really, if you listen to the president and listen very closely to what he has been saying, Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. He said last night, now you have another opportunity for peace. You did not take the first opportunity. And part two of our military operation is to protect American assets in the region. That was well underway, under the radar, long before anybody even got there. There were people that were being removed from the region. Fortification of certain places were taking place. And I think the president was very clear that the consequences would be devastating and severe. He said we already took out the hard targets, and they are certainly vulnerable in terms of the entire economy of Iran is based on their selling of oil. So a lot of those oil refineries are in one particular area. Their power grid could be taken out. Compared to the operation last night, this would be a layup. And the president, he stated his objectives. His objectives were fulfilled last night. Now, the Israelis, they have a different objective because they're the ones that have been taking on through Iran directly and their proxies hundreds of thousands of missiles being fired into their towns, their communities, and their cities. And I would not be surprised at all if the Israelis decided at some point that they wanted to go after that targets. But the president was clear in terms of what American interests were, America first, America's agenda. And he has been very, very consistent in terms of his ideology, philosophy. in terms of this national security of our country, and I think he shows that consistency here.
Yeah, Sean, to your point, Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, saying today about President Trump, quote, he seeks peace in Iran, should take that path. We have just a little bit of Hegseth's comments I'd like to play for you, Sean, and that is where he's making the point that basically only President Trump could have gotten this done. Watch here.
Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up.
Sean, your thoughts?
Griff, by the way, good to see all of you. I'm watching every weekend, so I feel like I'm just having coffee with my friends on the weekend. But in all seriousness, Pete is 1,000% right. I mean, we can take this back to 1979. Griff, our mutual friend, Colonel Oliver North, actively involved in operations with Iran. He went there. He had a suicide pill with him. No president has been able to deal a blow like this to the #1 state sponsor of terror. Here's the president's calculation. It's not that complicated if you listen to what he says. And I urge everybody to hear him when he speaks. He says Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If you go back in time, and he's been saying that since 2011. Okay, he has said it consistently. He gave them a 60-day window. And then he said, are you sure? Because it's going to be bad. He gives them up to 2 more weeks. The day after, that was Thursday. On Friday, you have the Iranian foreign minister said, no, they're not going to be involved in any conversations. And then last night happens. But it is consistent with what the president has done. I know a lot of people want to discuss and talk about or relitigate Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, we can relitigate one part of Afghanistan, and that's when Donald Trump dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. We can relitigate how to deal with Iran in the past, and the Iranians could have learned something when General Soleimani was taken off that tarmac and that terror threat was removed. We could have learned something when President Trump took out Baghdadi and associates, and we really could have learned a lot if we watched President Trump. Remember, under Obama and Biden, the ISIS caliphate built up. It was a clear and present danger to the world, and Donald Trump systematically wiped them out step by step. He walked them back, and the ISIS caliphate ceases to exist. Now, what's fascinating is what's going to happen next. Clearly, our military, our Pentagon, is prepared for any possible retaliation. But the message has been sent, like the message was sent before last night. The message before last night was, you can't have a nuclear weapon. Take a peaceful solution. We are offering you a pathway towards such. Part 2 of that is, if you attack any assets of the United States of America in the region, we will overwhelmingly devastate you. I would argue, off the top of my head, probably the first 2 targets would be refineries, their electric grid that is run by gas, and probably, if we know, as the president had stated last week, where the supreme leader is, the rest or the remaining leadership, because the Israelis had already wiped out most of it to begin with. But a message has been sent to the world. The Trump doctrine is very different, very unique than any other president in the history of this country. And I think he has proven that you can successfully take out and neutralize threats in the world without getting involved in forever wars. I think he's proven that once again. It doesn't mean that there's still not we're in danger. Joe Biden and Kamala allowed, known terrorists into our country, so we have to be on the watch right now.
Sean, Pete Hegseth said that Donald Trump, or President Trump, effectively obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions, and I think that that's fair to say. We obviously we need to see more things that come out of the site and how much, but it appears that that is what has happened, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I believe that President Trump is a lot different than any other Republicans, and he's the master negotiator. He's extended the olive branch, if you will, to the Iranian regime and said, let's have peace. But what about Israel's ambitions for regime change. Can that also be curtailed in order to get that peace negotiation and end things so that it doesn't expand?
Well, the president was clear, too, last night that maybe like never before have two countries been able to coordinate and work together to create an atmosphere where America had the greatest odds of success to pull off what Jennifer Griffin described as one of the most complicated and sophisticated and absolutely brilliant military efforts in the last number of decades. I can't think of an operation that has been this big, this wide, this successful. As others have said, past presidents wanted to do it. My conversation with the president last night, he was very sober. He did start giving me some of the details just as I was coming on the air. Literally, I walked into my studio about 1 minute, less than 1 minute, because I've been conversing with him, and gave me some of the details. Now that we have more details this morning, wow, I'm kind of blown away. I am impressed beyond words of the efforts of our military. I'm very proud of them. I'm very grateful to them. And I'm glad this was a huge success. And I will say this to the mullahs in Iran and the supreme leader in Iran: if you are foolish enough not to listen to him this time, you won't have a country by the end of this.
I think that's clear.
They'd be wise to heed his words this time.
Largest B-2 operational strike in history, second longest in history, the longest since 9/11. You can watch Hannity weekdays, 9 p.m. Sean Hannity, as always, a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you for tuning into the live show. America First. That is the theme for where we are right now. America First. All right. Let's check this out, and we're going to let everybody enjoy their Monday morning. Here we go.
We are back with the Fox News alert. U.S. military bases in the Middle East remain vigilant after Iran threatened to retaliate after yesterday's strikes, which hit 3 of the country's nuclear facilities. The attack was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history, utilizing 7 of the stealth bombers and more than 125 other U.S. military aircraft, according to the Pentagon. In total, the U.S. employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons, including 14 of the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs and over 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from a U.S. submarine. Lucas Tomlinson is live at the Pentagon with the latest. Lucas, what new information do you have for us tonight?
Well, good evening, Katie. Where did those other 31 bombs and missiles come from? They came from U.S. military fighter jets, which were the first into Iran ahead of the B-2 strike to launch this operation. Here was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Caine.
The U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats.
Now, this mission began with deception. 9 B-2 stealth bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri just after midnight early Saturday. 2 flew west over the Pacific to act as decoys. But 7 of those B-2s did not fly west. They flew quietly to the east, not squawking with minimal communication. Their destination, Iran's underground nuclear facilities, of course. The B-2s entered Iranian airspace at 6 p.m. Eastern. 40 minutes later, those B-2s dropped those 14 massive bunker-busting bombs. 12 hit the underground uranium enrichment site in Fordo. 2 struck Natanz. And at the same time, those 15-ton bombs hit their targets. 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from a guided missile submarine, just one, Katie, slamming into the nuclear site in Isfahan, the 3rd target. And this afternoon, those B-2s landed back home at their base in Missouri to complete their 37-hour round-trip mission. They were refueled at least 3 times in the air each way. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says this mission against Iran is not open-ended and does not seek regime change. Katie?
From the air and the sea. Thank you, Lucas. Amazing. Good to see you. All right. Well, the United States successfully attacked 3 Iranian nuclear sites last night, including the Fordow facility, which was Iran's last untouched nuclear base buried deep underground and required the U.S. to use bunker buster bombs. These bombs were also used on the Natanz nuclear site. Meanwhile, U.S. submarines fired over 24 Tomahawk missiles at the Isfahan nuclear site, as well as the Natanz site. Joey Jones is here to break down why this mission was such a success and what might happen next. Over to you, Joey.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to get through these first few screens, and I'm going to nerd out on a bomb real quick. So this is kind of a schematic of what happened. The red here shows you where the Tomahawks came in from. The blue shows you the egress, the coming in and the coming out of the plane. So let's go ahead and move forward and talk a little bit about the mission. 7,085 miles from Missouri straight to Iran. We don't know they went straight there, but pretty much. You see here it says it'll go about 6,900 miles before refueling. That's without 60,000 pounds of a bomb strapped to its belly. So it refueled multiple times along the way. I don't know exactly where, but to do an air refueling at night with a stealth bomber, man, just so impressive. So let's get to the bomb itself. We've heard a lot about it. I'm going to tell you probably a little bit more than I should, but that's okay. So what happens here is from here to here maybe down here, this is your penetrator. What happens here is you have 2 different types of explosives. So you've got, and these are polymer explosives. So what they are is they're not very sensitive at all. So you have 2 different types of explosives, and it's wrapped and coated in 25,000 pounds of steel, because there's only about 5,500 pounds of explosives in here. What you have up here is your guidance unit. So all of the guidance happens up here. This is where your electronics are. This is what's stabilizing it and causing it to go on course. So what happens is when this cone hits, it causes a chain reaction through multiple fuses. So that impact inertia is what we call it. You have different motions like setback, like when your car takes off, throws you back in the seat, that's setback. When your car hits a wall, you go forward, that's impact inertia. When the impact inertia of it hitting the ground happens, you have a time delay fuse in here or a delay fuse in here. And what happens is it actually, I believe, initiates from the bottom and goes forward into your explosive. So think of a sensitive explosive here, a slightly less sensitive explosive, slightly less sensitive explosive, and that's so that they can withstand the impact of going into the ground 100 feet without blowing up from a sympathetic detonation. So what I really want to show you here is that this is super simple. This guidance unit, we use that on all types of guided bombs. The fuses that are in it, we use those fuses on all types of bombs. The explosives that's in it, that's explosives that we use all the time with various types of bombs. A penetrating bomb is not all that uncommon. So when we say the United States is the only country that has the capability to do this, a lot of it has to do with how it got there. The fact that we can deliver it the way we did. And we're the only country that's put the parts together and said, we have this capability, dare you to dig something in the ground, and that's what happened. So I want to show you a little bit more kinetic version of that map we showed you earlier. So what we're learning happened is when the naval ships set off the Tomahawk missiles, from my understanding of the timeline, is they actually fired the missiles before the stealth bombers got into the area of operation. The missiles went very far, obviously, and then the stealth bombers were able to do their thing before the Tomahawk missiles hit. So that's that coordination, that synchronizing that we talk about. These missiles, the Tomahawk missiles, what makes them so effective is they're essentially drone planes. They have the ability to change course, even change target while flying. So any type of missile, unlike that bomb I just showed you, it has propulsion behind it. So the warhead, the actual payload is not going to be as much because so much of it is the rocket fuel used to get it there. And from my recollection, I think there's only about 1,000-pound bomb in those Tomahawk missiles. That's probably why they fired so many of them. And then to move on here to the very last screen, these are the bases of our men and women in uniform that are vulnerable to attack now. I can't tell you an ordnance order of battle. I can't tell you which one of these is a higher target than the other, but I can tell you I lived at the Al Asad Air Base, and that is a very important air base for us. It's big, it's fortified. I don't know what we have there, but I would imagine it's assets we need. Any of these that say air base, in my opinion, are a higher value target because it's my belief that if Iran comes back with a measured response, not trying to draw blood, but to take away assets to show that they can respond, they're going to go after maybe planes and things like that. I don't know that. I haven't heard that. But that's my presumption as a ground troop that just knows how to play the game Risk. So, guys, hopefully that was educational, helped you understand some of the rhetoric and some of the explanations that have come across. At the end of the day, what you need to know is that our military is badass. And when it comes to conventional war, we are the conventional superpower.
Yes.
There you have it. And that's from an actual veteran who sacrificed his limbs for the United States. Once again, shout out to the veterans. God bless the military personnel. Without you guys, there would be no homeland. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Alrighty. The former Vice
President
President
Trump receiving praise today for the covert mission to strike Iran's nuclear facilities from his former Vice President Mike Pence, who said this, quote, President Trump made the right call to deploy American forces to strike nuclear sites in Iran, and he should be commended for his decisive leadership. Iran could never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. Thanks to the resolve of our commander-in-chief and the courage and professionalism of our armed forces, America, Israel, and the free world are safer as a result. Tonight, President Trump proved again that the United States of America is the leader of the free world, and America stands with Israel. Former Vice President Mike Pence joins me now. Good to have you with us, Vice President Pence. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Martha.
You know, the things that you point out there, the importance of the free world, and the fact that, you know, President Trump made this very gutsy move. I just want to go back to the pre-election period in 2024, because you joined me here several times then. And this is what you said in March of the election year. Watch.
Donald Trump is pursuing and articulating an agenda that is at odds with the conservative agenda that we governed on during our 4 years. And that's why I cannot, in good conscience, endorse Donald Trump in this campaign.
So now, you know, at this point in the presidency and watching how it's playing out, do you have any regrets about that statement back then?
You know, the president and I have had our differences, which resulted in me staying out of the 2024 race. But I have to tell you, I couldn't be more proud of President Trump's decisive leadership in this moment, or the extraordinary professionalism and courage of our armed forces that brought about this historic mission. I mean, I must tell you, I saw last night as really a continuation of the policies of our administration, where we isolated Iran as never before. We got out of the Iran nuclear deal. We used force, first against Syria when they used chemical weapons on their own people. We took down the ISIS caliphate with our military and their leader, and of course the president's decision, which is very reminiscent to last night, the president's decision to take down Qasem Soleimani. I've been there at his side, and I must tell you, I honestly had no doubt that if the Iranians did not step up and make a deal to dismantle entirely the uranium enrichment program, that President Trump would act, our armed forces would deliver, and that's just what happened.
You know, I mean, you talk about how necessary this move was, and that it may, many people say, rewrite the Middle East. And, you know, so I'm just curious, when you look back now, do you think that he is the only person who was out there running for president who would have ever done this? And are those consequences big enough that it makes you regret not supporting?
Well, Martha, there's not a day goes by that I wish Kamala Harris was president of the United States. I expect if she'd have somehow found a way to win that election, we'd have been back to the policies of appeasement that the Biden-Harris administration implemented. But
I mean, even over other Republicans who ran,
I think it set the stage for October the 7th.
Yeah.
I mean,
would any of the other Republicans who ran
Martha,
have made this mission last night?
Well, I think many would have. I certainly would have not hesitated to move as the president did. But look, I don't think I'm not in the rearview mirror today, Martha. I mean, I'm looking eyes forward, and I really do want to commend President Trump and his entire national security team for doing what really needed to be done. The very idea that the most dangerous regime in the world would have possession of the most dangerous weapons on earth has been intolerable. It's been the long-standing policy, was during our administration, that Iran would never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. I think Israel took important and decisive efforts when they launched an attack on Iran 1 week ago, and with the defensive support of our forces, they managed to essentially control the airspace, create this opportunity. The president gave the Iranians 60 days. Israel launched on the 61st day, and the president told them, you need to come to the table. And when they didn't, President Trump acted. And that's just the kind of leadership the American people would expect.
We're looking at the scene around the Situation Room, and I have to say it's good to see these images and the thoughtfulness on people's faces around the table. And I see Susie Weil there, and I think she's done an extraordinary job as chief of staff of keeping things very much on track. Obviously, the president trusts her a lot. She's involved in all of these situations. And I wonder, as you reflect on the first term and you look at things now, what do you think is the major difference?
Well, look, I think it's different personnel, but I think what you saw last night is when it comes to the national security of the people of the United States, when it comes to the security of our most cherished ally, Israel, nothing's really changed. I mean, I sat at that table. I was in the room when we literally watched our armed forces take down Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi with satellite imagery on the big screen. I was at the president's side when he made the decision to essentially launch the effort that took down the most dangerous terrorist in the world, in Qasem Soleimani. It's why I really knew in my heart that if Iran didn't come to the table, that President Trump would make good on the threat, that if they were not willing to dismantle their uranium enrichment deal, it would be destroyed. And my hope is, as the bomb damage assessments continue to come in, my hope is we've substantially advanced that cause. And if we haven't completely eliminated their program, that we have set it back years and really set the conditions to ultimately achieve the goal of a peaceful future in the Middle East without Iran making a threat of using nuclear weapons against Israel, our allies, or the United
Israel,
States.
Obviously very happy, and this is a very consequential.
And this is what I expect from every single American. It's okay to not actually support everything Trump does, but on this issue, you should be on American side. And of course, Pence has said a lot about Trump. However, he is on American side. He is on the commander-in-chief side when it comes to this decision. So, shout out to Pence.
All right, Sandra, let's bring into the conversation Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds, who's on the House Oversight Committee, and Greg Steube, who's on the House Intelligence Committee. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. Congressman Donalds, let's start with you. What's your reaction to what happened last night, and what are you thinking about the days ahead?
My reaction is simple. The president has been saying for quite some time he wanted peace. The Ayatollahs were stonewalling, which they've been doing really for 40 years. This is not a new thing. They've been doing that for a long time. And they tried to call the president's bluff, and he wasn't bluffing. At the end of the day, he's been very clear. Iran is not going to have nuclear weapons. They are a terrorist regime. Everybody knows that. And you simply cannot take that chance. So he told them, let's negotiate or else. They decided not to negotiate. So or else.
So President Trump last night, Congressman Steube, when he was talking about the aftermath of the attack, pointed to the fact that Iran has been killing Americans for a long time, particularly in Iraq with those explosively formed penetrators. As a member of the JAG Corps, you were in Iraq, part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Well, what's your thought about the fact that the president really punched the Iranian nuclear program in the nose very hard?
Yeah, what's interesting about this is Democrats are saying the Iranians haven't done anything, and they've killed over 600 of our service members. In Trump's first term, and they took out Soleimani, because he was the mastermind behind all of the explosive devices that killed, maimed, and injured a lot of our service members in Iraq and Afghanistan, specifically Iraq. So over 600 service members have died as a result of the hands of Iranian proxies. That's not to mention the effect of Hamas and Hezbollah on Israel. Iran is the largest state sponsor of terror. So for the president to make this decision, I think is a very strong fitting of strong strength from the White House, that America's not going to put up with you being the state sponsor of terror in the world. The president wants peace. And taking out those nuclear sites will get us peace in the Middle East.
So we're hearing a lot from Democrats saying the president didn't go to Congress. I mean, why would he go to Congress? The operational security around this was airtight. You start telling all sorts of people in Congress, and it's bound to leak out. But it's not just Democrats who are making noise about this. It's a couple of Republicans as well. This is Ro Khanna, who tweeted this out. Trump struck Iran without any authorization of Congress. We need to immediately return to D.C. and vote on Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, and my War Powers resolution to prevent America from being dragged into another endless Middle East war. Congressman Donalds, do you have any concern that we'll be dragged into another Middle East war?
No, I really don't. Knowing the president, his stance on this, and the team around him, the last thing we want is another long-term engagement like Iraq or Afghanistan. Let's be clear. The reason why those conflicts lasted so long is because previous administrations decided that we were going to inject Western constitutional democracy in Iraq or Afghanistan. That is not what the president is trying to do here, not whatsoever. And I do agree with the fact that they did not come to Congress because, let's be clear, members of Congress leak all the time. We have meetings where stuff in meetings get leaked to the press. So I think it was the right decision for them to keep this airtight, to carry out the mission that saved American lives, saved those pilots' lives, kept them safe while they were on that dangerous mission. So I commend the president and his team and their actions.
We want to bring Sandra in. Sandra?
Yeah, Congressman Steube, if I could jump in here, what are you hearing with your colleagues in Congress as our Chad Pergram is reporting that while there is bipartisan, applause for what has been done here by President Trump, there are some pushing back saying it's unconstitutional and they're going to try to prevent any further action on the part of this administration. To them, you say what?
To them, I say they need to go back to, or maybe even go to law school, because what President Trump has done here is absolutely constitutional. He has the authority to protect our service members, to be able to take military action when he deems authorized under the U.S. Constitution. You don't have to get a declaration of war to protect our service members in or around the region. The president has stated publicly that he believed that they were had the capability of nuclear weapons. We have bases, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but all over the region that would be suspect of being attacked. He absolutely has the constitutional authority as president of the United States to do what he did today, and anything otherwise is just not being factual.
So where do you think all of this goes from here, Congressman Steube?
I don't see Congress taking any action whatsoever to try to limit President Trump's war powers. They wouldn't have the votes for that in the House. So I think what you're going to see is an administration that's going to monitor now the Iranian response to this. They have been very clear that if the Iranians try to attack our service members in the region, we are going to respond. The United States military is going to respond. So I hope they don't decide to do that. But if past history shows us anything, the Iranians are going to try to retaliate. And if they do, based on what President Trump said, they will be met with a very swift response.
And Congressman Donalds, if you could just finish up with a few seconds left here, what's your response to any suggestion from Iran that they are seeking to retaliate after this?
In short, that would be foolish. We have a significant advantage when it comes to military capability. Everybody knows that. At the end of the day, the president wants peace. He wants to negotiate, but there was not going to be any negotiations around a nuclear program where they've already enriched uranium to 60%, which doesn't take you much to get to weapons grade and then to put that on the tip of missiles. We're just not going to go there. So we can have peace. It can be negotiated, but it's not going to be with the Iranians getting now into a tit for tat with the United States. It's simply not going to work out for them. They should choose peace. That will be in the best interest of the Iranian people.
Well, let's hope.
There you have it. The Iranian supreme leaders should think about the 100 million Iranians, peaceful Iranians, smart Iranians, loving Iranians, okay? because the United States is not at war with Iranian people. Everybody should understand that fact. The commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, only gave a precise, exclusive directive to destroy the nuclear sites. So, supreme leaders of Iran should come to the table and get this deal signed.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in California Republican Congressman and House Foreign Affairs Committee member Darrell. Issa, Congressman, good to see you. Thanks very much for coming back after being here 2 o'clock in the morning. You're doing yeoman duty here. I want to play a little bit more of Tim Kaine, because he does seem to be shouting from the rooftops that the president should have gone to Congress first. Listen.
It's an empty rooftop, though.
Just Friday night, the Israeli foreign minister said that its bombing campaign over the last 9 days had set back the Iranian nuclear program by at least 2 or 3 years. There was no imminent threat to the United States from this nuclear program. It was an offensive war of choice by a president without consultation with Congress.
What do you say, an offensive war of choice without consultation of Congress?
Well, you know, it's always what the other side says. They didn't say it when President Obama acted against Libya. It's always, that's a partisan statement.
How many cruise missiles did Bill Clinton fire into Afghanistan without getting congressional?
Well, he actually had about 5 different places over his career he did it. He was very much an activist. But I think your point about cruise missiles is important. These are not ground troops. We're not entangled in a war. All of us understand that the 8 years of the Iran-Iraq war means that you do not go into a country of, nearly 90 million people and think that you're going to get out quickly. So we're not going in. We have no need to go in. We're not trying, the president is not trying to do regime change. He's made that clear. He is trying to change the regime's way of doing business for the first time in a real meaningful way since Reagan.
There is a lot of concern about regime change, though, and what might come next. I went to dinner on Friday night with a couple of Iranian friends. And that's the one big thing that they worry about is if the Ayatollah were to fall, what replaces it? Joaquin Castro had those same concerns. Listen to what he said.
If the government of Iran collapses, we could have a repeat of what happened with Iraq. Al-Qaeda and later ISIS essentially franchised across the Middle East and parts of North Africa, and the threat of terrorism, at least for a while, became even greater because of that.
So what about those concerns? And we've heard from a lot of Iranians that, yeah, you've got some groups on the outside, the Shah's son and other groups, but you don't have anybody from the inside that's ready to do this. They say that we'd love to have democracy in Iran, but we're not ready to rise up and take over yet.
Well, I think that's simply something you hear from people who are assuming that the status quo is acceptable.
No. They hate the status quo.
No, but you hear that, but I've met with all the groups, the Shah's groups, MEK and other groups. Each doesn't like each other. But the reality is that you have 2 major groups in Iran. More than 85% of the population are Shia, the majority of those being, quote, Persians. They don't have the same breakdown that you had in Iraq, where you have a majority and a minority, and the majority's been ruled by the minority for decades. They don't want the Shah back. They say they want democracy. It's doubtful that they'd get a true democracy. But can you do worse than a theocracy that essentially imprisons their own people and, in fact, it tries to spread throughout the rest of the world their form of Shia radicalism?
Well, if the IRGC took over, I mean, they're basically in control now, but if they took over all the strings of power, some people say that could be worse.
They've been in control since the little fake game they did under Jimmy Carter. Those are just students. The reality is the same group of people have been in control. They use a president by title and an Ayatollah, and they have all this claim of separation. The fact is, it is a group of, call it 5% or 10% of the population that are radical Islamist. They're already in control. So could we do as bad? Of course, something bad could happen. But do the people of Iran deserve an opportunity? Yes. Have they risen up by the hundreds of thousands and millions, time and time again, only to find themselves being killed in the streets and the West not coming to their aid? So as we try to change this regime's behavior, the hope is that, yes, they may rise up and they may be successful. But the plan by President Trump, very wisely, is to change the behavior of the regime. In 1987, when they last threatened to and did close down the straits, Reagan went in and he sunk their Navy, killed their admiral. It wasn't a big action, but it was big enough to change their behavior for a number of years.
Well, we'll anxiously anticipate.
All right, the commander-in-chief is now saying, in fact, there may be a regime change. All right.
Let's bring in senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of When China Attacks, Colonel Grant Newsham. Colonel, good morning to you. Thank you for hopping on with us. So China has responded to this already. They've condemned this attack, says it damages Washington's credibility and are concerned that the situation may spiral out of control. So that's what they're saying publicly. But behind closed doors, what conversations are really taking place when it comes to decision making in key areas of interest, including aggression, potential aggression towards Taiwan?
Well, what they're looking at is this big change that's happened in the United States. Suddenly you have a president who has some backbone and did what needed to be done for the first time in 45 years when he attacked Iran. The Iranians have been at war with us for 45 years, 46 actually. They've killed some thousands of Americans, injured and maimed a lot more, and nobody ever did anything other than to send them pallets of cash and try to negotiate a deal. And here you had someone that attacked them. So China was looking at Taiwan also and thinking maybe the Americans aren't that serious. And this has raised some doubts in China's calculus when it comes to Taiwan, when they look at what's just happened in Iran. But of course, we have to see how this plays out, because China has been very happy to have the Americans occupied in the Middle East. That means you can't pay as much attention to the Western Pacific, to Taiwan.
That's a great point on how this could go one way or the other. And before this strike, Colonel, there were reports of Chinese cargo flights nearing Iranian airspace. What do you think that was all about?
Well, it could be. There's always things that we don't know about that happened. They were certainly flying things into Russia at the start of the Ukraine war, and the administration hushed it all up. So that is a possibility. But the bigger issue is that China has been the main backer of Iran for decades. And that includes providing a lot of money, a lot of weapons that the Iranians have given to Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis as well. And now China actually buys 90% of Iran's oil. So that's about 20% of Iran's GDP. And that's the real issue here, is the amount of support that China has given to Iran and used Iran really as a cat's paw, as a proxy to attack America's friends in the region, to cause chaos. And that to the Chinese perspective, that works to their advantage. Now we have to wonder, are we going to cut off Iran's oil exports and force the Chinese to go buy oil elsewhere?
Well, that's a great question, Colonel, because yesterday Iran's parliament did approve a plan to close the Strait of Hormuz, which would block $1 billion of oil shipments per day. This is Iranian retaliation, but like you said, this would impact China far more than it would the United States. So here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday. Watch this.
Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that, because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that.
So does China do that? Do they call Iran and say, do not close the Strait of Hormuz?
They might, or they might say just let Chinese ships through, like they've done in the Red Sea with the Houthis. So that is a possibility. But closing off the Straits of Hormuz is actually harder than you might think. It's been tried before, back in the 80s, and the Iranians couldn't pull it off. But that would require more of a commitment by U.S. forces. And we don't seem to have too many allies who are willing to jump in, but maybe we could shame a few into that. So it's easier said than done, but it is a concern. Whether or not China will actually help us or do us any favors, I doubt that. We should give them a choice, really. Do you want to do business with Iran, or do you want to do business with us? You do that, and China just might act a little differently.
Yeah, so yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance said that China, Russia, and the United States have one thing in common, and it's that neither of these nations want Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. Is that true? And if so, do you think President Trump will ever get a private thank you from Russia or China?
I'm not so sure about that. And I'm not so sure the Russians or the Chinese really mind all that much if the Iranians have nuclear weapons. Look, they've allowed the Pakistanis to have them, the North Koreans to have them. Those have all been developed with Chinese assistance. And the Russians have played a role in this as well in both of those cases. So I don't know that we have that commonality of interest as the administration might think.
Colonel Grant Newsham, thank you very much for joining us this morning. A Fox Business alert, Iran's parliament voting in favor of closing a major shipping route, putting as much as 1/5 of the world's oil supply at risk. It could cost suppliers big time, as Forbes finds that roughly $1 billion worth of oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz daily.
Cheryl Casoni from our sister network Fox Business here with the details. Cheryl.
Good morning. Yeah, when oil prices actually started trading last night, we did see an initial bump. We've seen that kind of come back a little bit now, because the question is, if they decide to eventually close the Strait of Hormuz, and it is not for sure yet because the Iranian Security Council has to be the ultimate decider on that, that means that 20% of the world's oil is going to be, well, shut off. This is a problem, though, guys, for China, because 3.3 million barrels a day go to China through the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. And if you listen to Secretary Rubio, who was on with Maria yesterday on Fox News, he says that's not a good plan for Iran. Watch.
Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that, because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that.
Yeah, so here's a real quick number from Forbes. More than half of the energy that flows through the strait, again, goes to China. So if you look at a map here, just to kind of give you guys a sense of what we're talking about here and why the Strait of Hormuz is so crucial to global supply of oil. It connects the Gulf of Oman with the Persian Gulf. But, you know, look, at the end of the day, the pressure could be on China to deal with Iran. What were those planes doing going into China? I mean, excuse me, into Iran, those Chinese planes. You know, there's a lot of questions here, guys.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking to Colonel Grant Newsham, who's become an expert on China, and he says that China could make that call to Iran, but what they could say is, you can close the strait, but just allow our ships to go through. So that could also be another real possibility there.
There's also another possibility here that's unfortunate. I heard you talk about this in the last hour on the program, is that you could see some smaller level attacks. It could be IRGC, small boat attacks against vessels, not Iranian vessels that are exporting oil over to China, but other world ships, global ships that are going to other destinations. And that's another problem. There are other ways that Iran could try to find a way to push back against the United States.
But I do think it is clear that China's economy relies on cheap Iranian gas, under market value gas. Something like this could hurt them. So to that point, will China end up sort of pushing for a resolution if Iran decides to close off the Strait of Hormuz? It certainly is fascinating to watch. I know Cheryl's going to be talking a lot more about this over the next 3 hours on Mornings with Maria.
We are.
Cheryl, thank you.
Thank you very much. Guys. All right, let's bring in co-host of the Big Money Show, Taylor Riggs. Taylor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
If Iran does close this strait, how does it impact Americans here at home at the pump?
You know, I'm not sure it does immediately, because we are much more independent from Iran and all of the global oil supply than we were, let's talk about back in the 1990s, which we could go into when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and then we had to get involved, and then that was a whole other issue with oil. So the good news is we've totally diversified since then. The other good news is Trump went to Saudi Arabia in the Middle East just last month, right? And shored up all of our support there. So to follow up on what Cheryl said, Saudi Arabia, if they close the Strait of Hormuz, Saudi Arabia has channels through the Red Sea where they could still export oil. And again, it's only 20%. So there are other levels, I think, that the Middle East could pull. And Trump has done a very good job of trying to isolate Iran. So let's quickly talk about Iraq invades Kuwait in 1990. Oil prices spike, the S&P 500. The equity markets fall. So if you're waking up this morning, you're like, I'm going to just sell my whole equity portfolio. I'm totally freaked out. I think this is World War III. You plunge 20% 2 months later, and then you rally 24% even before the U.S. gets involved the following January. By the following April, you've regained all of that money and then more. So I think it's important for Americans to wake up and say this is very different in 30, 40 years. Right. And there's, we're more diversified and we're a much more resilient economy. So that is the good news.
I'm glad you mentioned wake up, because we have a lot of people who wake up literally at 5:45.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning to you. You turn this show on, and probably this morning, they turn it on for business at around this time.
Yeah.
This morning, they're probably wondering a dollar amount, a penny amount, a cent amount that their gas is going to go up at the pump.
Yep.
If I'm hearing you, you don't think it's going to go up that much.
No.
So I had a question for you. How much is it going to go up and how soon? You're saying no and not never.
Yeah, I've heard 3 to 6 cents a gallon in the short term. Again, all of this matters, just like with the tariff conversation, duration and intensity. So as long as this isn't a drawn out thing, look at oil. If oil goes to 80, that's the signal that this is the market pricing in longer and more intense than we thought. That's price per barrel, not gas at the pump. If it goes above 80, then that translates into maybe 3 to 6 cents higher at the pump. A couple months from now. We're also in peak driving season, peak travel season. So oil prices were going to go up anyways because we're all out on the road driving to the beach or whatnot. So a caution, but the good news is we're a much more diversified economy than we were, let's say, in the 1990s when this really did impact us.
And on that front, some more numbers here. The U.S. imports 0.7 million barrels per day of crude oil from Persian Gulf countries through the Strait of Hormuz, which accounts for 3% of our consumption.
Yeah.
70 to 82% of all of the oil from the Strait of Hormuz is destined for Asian markets. So the largest recipient is absolutely China, which is why Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that yesterday.
I would be cautioned about getting nervous about Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's biggest source of revenue to fund these wars is selling oil to China. They can't bite the hand that feeds them. We're not really buying it. China is.
Yeah.
So they also were in a tight spot where they need the revenue. China needs the oil. They're dependent on each other. We're not the major player involved in that relationship the way we were 30 years ago.
Yeah, the only concern is I totally understand what you're saying, but the oil markets are still somewhat interconnected.
Yes.
I'm going to go worst case scenario, and then I promise I'll stop going to negative town here.
Let's do it.
What if we need to increase our capacity? We can't just build a refinery in a week. Do we have the capacity to bump up from our current levels, or are we already maxed out?
So the good news is break evens, which is Chevron, Exxon, they can make money when oil's at $50 a barrel. If oil's at $80 a barrel, all these American U.S. companies are like, great, this is profitable for me to drill because I can make money at 50 and it's trading at 80. Yes, that takes time. And yes, we have depleted the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Biden depleted that, which is why you don't deplete it, because in times like this, you need that. So we need to work on refilling that. I think Trump's trying to work on doing that so that we have that reserve to draw from in times of crisis.
Yeah, low oil prices mean new drilling has stopped.
Yes.
So an increase in prices can be conducive to the American oil industry. So another element of
And she actually nailed that point, saying that Trump actually made friends with Saudi Arabia, the Arabian countries, or Arabian states. But the fact is, this man is a chess player. He knows what he already wanted to do for a long time in case Iran didn't come to the table. So, look, I believe this is the right man for the job. I believe Trump is the right person to do what needs to be done. So, I just implore Americans to actually be patient with this man, be patient with the President of the United States, and just watch how this plays out.
Begin this morning with a Fox News alert. The U.S. now braces for retaliation from Iran after carrying out Operation Midnight Hammer, which has severely damaged their key nuclear facilities. U.S. bases across the Middle East are on high alert as Iran vows to respond. And anti-American protesters take over the streets of Tehran, but President Trump isn't ruling out potential regime change in the nation. You are watching Fox and Friends First. On this Monday morning, I'm Carly Shimkus.
And I am Todd Pyro. We have live team coverage this morning. Madeline Rivera in Washington with President Trump's plans for today, and former U.S. Marine Mark Geist here to explain the tactics used by the U.S. to carry out this operation. But first, let's go to Mike Tobin, live on the ground in Tel Aviv as sirens blare across Israel right now. Mike.
And Todd and Carly, just moments ago, we got the all clear as waves of missiles were inbound from Iran to the north and really from the north to the south of Israel. We've got the reports of one rocket that made impact about halfway between here in Tel Aviv and the Gaza Strip. We're waiting for details on that. Meantime, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been explaining about the timing of the attack. The Prime Minister explained that Iran had enough uranium enriched just below weapons grade to make about 10 bombs. And he says after Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah was killed, Iran began a desperate rush to build that bomb, so Israel had to act.
They had enough of that, 9 or 10 bombs worth of enriched uranium, but they needed to make the bomb itself. And the bomb itself they rushed to do right after the collapse of the terror axis and the removal of Nasrallah. Therefore, we had to act.
The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency says the enriched uranium was not destroyed in the U.S. strike. Iran had moved it ahead of time. Speaking to the UN Security Council, Rafael Grossi continues to push for negotiation as a means to stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear bomb.
We have a window of opportunity to return to dialogue and diplomacy. If that window closes, violence and destruction could reach unthinkable levels, and the global non-proliferation regime, as we know it, could crumble and fall.
Now, Grossi does not disagree with President Trump's claim that substantial damage was done to Iran's nuclear sites. The president posted on Truth Social, the biggest damage took place far below ground, level, bullseye. Grossi noted that the centrifuges are extremely fragile and they spin very fast. Something as simple as a power outage can cause them to break. Todd and Carly?
Yeah, Mike, yesterday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel is very, very close to completing its goals in Iran. So from an Israeli perspective, what does completing their mission look like and how much longer will it take to get there?
Well, they talk about three different prongs of notice, three different points that Israel is trying to accomplish. First would be the prevention of ballistic missiles and the firing on Israel. The second would be destruction of the nuclear program. And then they say destruction of Iran's ambitions to end the state of Israel. It really seems that that third one is based on the first two. And Israel does say substantial damage has been done to the nuclear program, certainly set them back. And they say upwards of 50% of the ballistic missile program has been destroyed. Carly?
Mike Tobin, live for us in Tel Aviv. Mike, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
President Trump expects.
Thank you to D. Limo. Shout out to D. Limo or D. Lemo. Person says, get something cool to drink. Thank you for the super chat. We have an esteemed member in the chat, Sandra. God bless you for tuning in. She says, good morning, Jen. Everyone. Thank you, D. Limo, for the super chat. God bless you. Here we go.
To meet with his national security team at 1 p.m. Eastern time today to discuss the next steps in Iran.
Madeline Rivera joins us live from Washington with all the details. Maddie, hello.
Good morning, Todd and Carly. Vice President J.D. Vance maintains the administration has not closed the door to diplomacy. Vance says this is a moment to actually reset the relationship with Iran because before the strikes, Iran was stonewalling the president, which is why he approved the strikes in the first place.
If you back up a little bit, we engaged in this diplomatic process. I think that he decided probably by mid-May that this process was not going anywhere, and so he decided to issue some private ultimatums to the Iranians. And then eventually, of course, we decided to destroy the Fordo nuclear facility and some of these other facilities ourselves.
As for the end goal here, Vance says they don't want a regime change. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the same thing, that they're focusing simply on eliminating Iran's ability to have a nuclear weapon.
If what they want is a country that has a nuclear energy program, they can have that. I mean, many countries around the world, I don't like the regime, but we're not into the regime change business here. We're into the safety and security of the United States business. So that's a choice they'll have to make. I hope they're being rational in their decision making. But I think the most important thing I hope they realize is the game is up.
But in a turnaround, the president did not rule out the possibility of a regime change, saying in a Truth Social post, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? Miga. Iran says they're not interested in diplomacy at this point. The U.S. warning Iran against retaliation, saying it has capabilities Iran has not yet seen. Carly and Todd.
Madeline Rivera, live for us in Washington. Maddie, thank you. Let's bring in former United States Marine and member of the Annex Security Team that fought the Battle of Benghazi, Mark Geist. Mark, good morning to you. So before this strike, analysts were talking about this mission in terms of one B-2 flying over one nuclear site with 2 bunker busters on board. And in reality, this mission included 7 B-2s, 14 bunker busters, 30 Tomahawk missiles, and 3 nuclear sites. So the size and scope of this is incredible. It's been dubbed Operation Midnight Hammer. So take us inside this. What goes into the planning of a mission like this, and what stood out to you in terms of the mission itself?
You know, I think one of the biggest things is in Washington, you know, especially with the time that we had leading up to this, the security around this operation did not get leaked whatsoever. That's commendable to the administration and to the planning phase of this. Outside of that, the planning phase has probably been ongoing for the last 30 to 60 days since President Trump started these negotiations and gave the diplomatic, I wouldn't say threats, but you know, he put in the known KPIs in there to ensure that they understood what was going to happen when he gave the number of days of about 60 days to respond on the diplomatic side.
You look. You're right. There wasn't a lot of talk in Washington about this beforehand. But you know what else really stood out to me about this mission? There wasn't a lot of talk while they were in the air. And to me, that is one of the most remarkable aspects of this. Air Force vet, Congressman August Pfluger, I think had the most colorful description of this mission and what happened in the air that I think I've ever heard. Take a listen to the congressman.
Think about you and your wife trying to meet up in Paris at a restaurant. 7:30 reservations, plus or minus a minute. Don't be early, don't be late. But you have 125 other guests that also have that same thing without cell phones. So the difficulty starts with just getting to the right place at the right time, and then you have to carry out the mission.
Mark, how? How did they do this without communication?
Well, there's always some type of communication, and, you know, it is all encrypted, that they can still maintain that, especially within the military structure itself. And that planning and that execution of what they did with the number of planes, I think surprised a lot of people, and I think that was necessary. It was a one-time chance to go after these nuclear facilities and to ensure that we stop them from being able to have a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, there were also deception tactics used. Here's Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kaine, talking about that. Watch this.
The U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats.
I mean, truly remarkable. Dive into that a little bit for us. There were also B-2s taking off from Missouri and flying west towards the Pacific, which also turned out to be a ruse.
Yeah, it did. And, you know, those are the tactics of warfare. We could go as far back as Sun Tzu and look at how that is and what they recommend then. And, President Trump, I think, is a study of history and a study of military history. And between that and all his advisors, I think they came up with a great plan.
Mark, we had a guest on the weekend show that said, yes, all the attention is going to be paid to the bombers themselves who dropped the payload, and rightly so. It is a remarkable mission. But this guest also said refueling in flight is one of the toughest parts of this mission. It is extremely difficult. Can you give us a little insight as to what makes it so difficult to refuel these planes, these bombers in flight?
Well, I would say anybody who's flown commercial up at high altitudes know that, it's not always a smooth ride. And when you're looking at taking two aircraft traveling the speeds that they are, in the conditions that they are, and you're trying to basically it's a 2 foot by 2 foot area that you are trying to bring that nozzle into and make connection to that other aircraft. And when doing that, there's so many things that can go wrong. And it is to the guys and gals out there that were doing this, that were behind the scenes, that will never be known, we got to give them kudos and a thumbs up to all that they did to help this mission become successful.
Amen to that. So what do you think the plane ride, Mark, was like back for them? We're talking about world-class professionals here, but after completing a mission like this and it being a successful one at that, the human side must also take over a bit.
It does. I mean, they are professional, and I can tell you, until they left Iranian airspace, and most likely until they get landed, there were limited celebration. It was once they got on the ground and things were all safe, and they knew that everyone was back home, that I'm sure there was some back patting and some great celebrations going on.
Yeah, don't celebrate before you cross the end zone. I'd imagine, in light of your experience in Benghazi, that you are a student of history. Can you put these strikes, in the context of other major events in history? In other words, when our kids, Carly and my kids, read about this in a history book in 20 years, what are they going to be comparing these strikes to?
These strikes are compared to any of the major military operations that we have encountered since the founding of this country, especially modern warfare since World War II. You have all of the different campaigns, Campaign Overlord, going into Sicily, going North Africa campaign, and going into these newer these areas that no one ever thought the American public or the American military could do that. And this one is even bigger because of the nature that is behind it. I mean, we're talking about nuclear armament of a country that has a deep hatred, or at least, and not the people, I'm talking about the regime, has a deep hatred of America and everything we stand for. And they've used their proxies, Hezbollah and Yemen and the Houthis, to attack us continually, and it's been increased. And this is something that is going to change that.
Well, more than 125 U.S. aircraft took part in this mission, and they got the job done. We are so grateful for them and for your service as well. Mark Geist, thank you for joining us this morning.
I'm Steve Doocy. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart.
Thank you for tuning in to the live show. It is your boy Genesis. You know what time it is. It is currently 7:33 a.m. And of course, today's date is the 23rd of June, 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, you are officially welcome to summer. All right? It's about to get hot. All right, with that being said, God is the greatest. America is the greatest country on earth. This is my opinion. America is the greatest country on the face of the earth. All right, if you take a look at the polls, it says here, do you support Trump action on Iran? We have over 6,000 people vote, and 54% of those people says yes, and 46% says no. So, majority ladies and gentlemen, majority takes the cake. Okay? Good morning. Good morning, America. All right? Shout out to the GOAT, Dr. Luke. God bless you for the super chat. God bless you for being here. God bless you for the support. Thank you. You are appreciated. Shout out to our esteemed members, Dr. Luke, the GOAT. Shout out to Sandra. Shout out to Ellie. Shout out to Ringmaster. God bless you. Thank you for being here. Shout out to the hard working, always present C. Shelley. Thank you, C. Shelley. God bless you. Did you see my message about subs? C. Shelley, no, I didn't see it. Can you put it up again? Can you please put it up again? So shout out to C. Shelley. Shout out to Mr. Booski, the Bucket Master. Shout out to Ender's Game. Shout out to who else? Jet, the newly crowned moderator. God bless you, C. Shelley. But God bless you, Jet, as well. Thank you, Jet. And who else? Terry Vinings, the Bama girl. God bless you, Terry. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for loving the United States. Shout out to Terry Vinings. God bless you. All right. Who else we got? And everybody in the chat, God bless you for being here. All right. And with that being said, I got to say this. Without the veterans, without the military personnel, we would have no homeland. Okay, so I got to say thank you to the military personnel. Shout out to the veterans. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Shout out to Rain Promo. Rain Promo, God bless you. You have been consistent as well. Shout out to Rain Promo. The Bucket Master is back in the building. Who else? Everybody, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. With that being said, instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on your dreams. Never give up on God. Believe in yourself. Believe in your dreams. And of course, believe in Almighty God. And God gave us a man who is capable. And remember, nothing happens on earth in this world without God knowing about it. So God actually knows Trump is the man for the job. So it preserved him and made him the president of the United States. That's just the facts. God made this man the United States president. Okay? That's why he won the election. So let's have some belief and some trust in the leader God has appointed for us. Okay, can we do that? Can we do that, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for being here one more time. You guys are the best. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, with that being said, God bless y'all. Get some rest because for some reason, we don't go to sleep on this channel. I don't know why, but we do not go to sleep on this channel because we love the United States. We do this because we love America, because we believe America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And we don't do this to cause some sort of division. No. As a matter of fact, we're doing this to promote unity. Okay, whether you're liberal, whether you are conservative, Republican, Democrats, it doesn't matter. Come in here, voice your opinion, be respectful. That's the only thing we ask. Be respectful. But we are Americans. We should support the American flag. We should support the American military. We should support the American veteran. We should support our commander-in-chief. We should support the American people. That's what it's all about. Can you put names of new subs up when they subscribe? I see other channels out there. I think this is a good idea. Shout out to C. Shelley for the new idea. I'll try. Okay. I'll try, C. Shelley. I'll try. All right, with that being said, God bless y'all. Thank you, thank you, thank you one more time. And God is the greatest. It is your boy Genesis. And I am signing out.